Hi there, and welcome to Outlaw Icons, where history whispers in the dark. Tonight, we invite you to settle in for the story of Henry Hill, the mobster who broke every rule, survived against impossible odds, and lived to tell the tale that would become one of cinema's greatest masterpieces. This is the real story behind Goodfellas, a journey from the streets of Brooklyn to the witness stand that brought down an empire. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? We love seeing this little underworld grow across countries and time zones. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because every week, we bring you deep dives into the lives of history's most notorious outlaws, the untold stories behind the legends, and the truth that's even stranger than fiction. Now, take a deep breath, let the noise of the day drift away, and prepare to step into the world of wise guys, million-dollar heists, and the ultimate betrayal. From the Cabstand where it all began, to the witness protection program where it all fell apart. This is the complete story of the man who survived to tell it all. This is Outlaw Icons, your sleepy dawn. Chapter 1. Streets of Brownsville. Picture a boy standing at his bedroom window in the summer of 1950. 11 years old, small for his age, staring down at the street below like he's watching a movie he desperately wants to be cast in. Across the street from his tenement building in Brownsville, Brooklyn, there's a cab stand. Not the kind of place you'd call for a ride to the airport. This is different. This is theater. Every day, men in tailored suits step out of gleaming Cadillacs. They move like kings through a kingdom of concrete and fire escapes. They laugh loud. They shake hands with both palms. Money changes hands in the open air like it's nothing more than a handshake between friends. The boy's name is Henry Hill, Jr., and he is mesmerized. His father is an electrician, Irish blood, quick fists when he's angry, which is often. His mother is Sicilian, an immigrant who crossed an ocean to scrub floors and raise 8 children in a neighborhood where hope comes in small doses. They work hard. They follow rules. They break their backs to keep food on the table and a roof overhead. And for what? To stay invisible, to stay poor. But those men across the street, they don't break their backs for anyone. Henry watches them every single day. He studies the way they carry themselves, the way people step aside when they walk past, the way cops nod and move along. He doesn't fully understand it yet, but he feels it. Power, real power, the kind you can't learn in school. The kind you can't get from a union card or a time clock. And Henry Hill hates school. He's dyslexic, though nobody uses that word back then. They just call him slow, stupid, a daydreamer. The letters on the page twist and blur. His teachers give up on him early. His classmates mock him. Every day in that classroom feels like drowning in slow motion. But across the street, that's a different kind of education. One that doesn't require reading. One that rewards cunning over spelling, loyalty over grammar. One morning, Henry doesn't go to school. He crosses the street instead. He walks right up to that cab stand like he belongs there, like he's been rehearsing this moment in his head for months. Because he has. He asks for a job. Any job. He'll sweep floors. He'll run errands. He'll do whatever they need. Just let him in. The men look at him. This scrawny kid with hungry eyes. They could laugh. They could tell him to get lost, but they don't, because they recognize something in him, something useful, hunger, ambition, the kind of desperation that makes a person willing to do things others won't. They give him a broom. That's how it starts, not with a gun or a heist or a body. With a broom, Henry sweeps the floor of that cab stand like it's the most important job in the world, because to him, it is. He listens. He watches. He learns the language of the street, the codes, the gestures. Who gets respect? Who gets ignored? Who gets hurt? One of the men takes notice. His name is Paul Vario, a captain in the Lucchese crime family. Thick build, calm demeanor, the kind of man who never raises his voice because he never has to. People listen the first time. Vario runs the cab stand as a front for his real business. Loan sharking, gambling, hijacking, extortion, a criminal empire disguised as a taxi dispatch. And now, Henry Hill is part of it. At first, it's small things. Delivering messages. Picking up packages. Nothing that would land him in prison. Just enough to prove he can be trusted. Just enough to make him feel like he's crossed an invisible line that separates him from his father's world. From the world of electricians and plumbers and men who bow their heads and say, "Yes, sir." Henry doesn't want to bow his head to anyone. His parents don't know. Or maybe they suspect, but don't want to believe. His mother keeps packing his school lunch. His father keeps asking about homework. Henry keeps lying. Every morning, he walks out the door with his books under his arm. Every morning, he heads straight for the cab stand. By age 14, Henry has stopped pretending. He drops out of school entirely. He tells his parents he got a construction job working for the Varios. It's not exactly a lie. He does work for them, just not the kind of work you put on a resume. The school sends letters home, truancy notices, warnings, the kind of mail that could ruin everything. But the men at the cab stand take care of it. They intercept Henry's mailman one afternoon, not with violence, with persuasion, with a quiet conversation over espresso at a corner pizzeria. From that day forward, every letter from the school gets delivered to the cab stand instead of the Hill family apartment. Problem solved. That's when Henry learns the most important lesson of his young life. Rules are only rules if you can't get around them. And if you know the right people, you can get around anything. He starts making real money. Not much by mob standards, but a fortune for a kid his age. He buys clothes. Nice ones. He styles his hair with pomade. He walks taller. He feels different. At home, his siblings still share bedrooms and hand-me-down shoes. But Henry has cash in his pocket and respect on the street. His father finds out eventually. Of course he does. A letter slips through. A teacher makes a phone call. The truth comes crashing down like a sledgehammer. Henry's father is furious. Not just angry. Terrified. He knows what those men across the street really are. He knows what they do to people who cross them. He knows his son is dancing with devils. He beats Henry. Hard. The kind of beating that leaves marks. The kind meant to teach a lesson that words can't. But it doesn't work. It never works. Because the next day, Henry shows up at the cab stand with bruises on his face and fire in his eyes. The men see him. They ask what happened. Henry tells them. And they make sure it never happens again. Not with threats. Not with violence. With protection. From that moment on, Henry Hill is not just some kid who sweeps floors. He's under the wing of Paul Vario. And that means something. That means his father can't touch him. That means the neighborhood looks at him differently. That means he's halfway in. But here's the thing about being halfway in. It's the most dangerous place to be. Because you can't go back. The old world won't take you. And the new world hasn't fully claimed you yet. You're suspended between two lives. 1 foot in daylight. 1 foot in shadow. And Henry Hill, he's about to step all the way into the dark. By 1955, Henry is no longer the boy at the window. He's part of the machinery. He knows the names, the faces, the hierarchy. He understands that there are rules, even in a world without rules. He learns that loyalty is currency. That silence is survival. That respect is earned in blood and kept through fear. But there's something else he learns too. Something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He learns that once you're in, you can never really get out. Not without consequences. Not without losing everything. Not without becoming the one thing the mob hates more than cops. A rat. But that's still decades away. Right now, Henry Hill is just a kid who traded a classroom for a cab stand. A broom for a future. A father's dream for a gangster's promise. And he's never felt more alive. Chapter 2. The Cabstand Years. The year 1955 marks the point of no return. Henry Hill is 12 years old, and he's made his choice. School is a memory. His father's world is a prison he's escaped. The cab stand across the street has become his universe. And Paul Vario has become something close to a father figure. The kind of father who teaches you how to survive in a world where survival means breaking laws most people don't even know exist. Henry's day starts before sunrise. While other kids his age are still asleep, dreaming about baseball games and summer vacation, Henry is already dressed and out the door. He walks through Brownsville like he owns a piece of it, because in a way he does. The shopkeepers nod. The old men playing cards on folding tables acknowledge him with subtle gestures. He's no longer just another kid from the neighborhood. He's connected. And in 1950s Brooklyn, being connected means everything. At the cab stand, the real education begins. This isn't about reading or math or history from a textbook. This is about understanding human nature, about reading a room, about knowing when to speak and when to disappear into the background. Henry learns to make coffee exactly how each man likes it. He learns which newspapers to buy and which sections matter. He learns that the racing forms get delivered before anything else. He learns that some conversations stop the moment he walks into a room. And that's okay, because that means he's not trusted yet. But he will be. Paul Vario runs his operation with the precision of a corporate executive. Except his corporation deals in cash only. No paper trails. No tax returns. No accountability to anyone except the men above him in the Lucchese family hierarchy. Vario owns legitimate businesses too. A pizzeria, a florist shop, a used car lot. All fronts for the real money. The gambling operation alone pulls in thousands of dollars a week. Working men betting paychecks on football games and horse races they'll never win. Vario doesn't force anyone to gamble. He just makes it available, makes it easy, makes it feel like friendship until the debt piles up and friendship turns into something else entirely. Henry watches how it works. A man places a bet. The man loses. The man promises to pay next week. Next week comes and the man still doesn't have the money. That's when the interest starts. 5%, 10%, 20%. The numbers grow like a tumor. And when the man still can't pay, Vario offers a solution. Do a favor. Make a delivery. Look the other way at the right moment. Suddenly the gambler becomes an accomplice. The debt gets paid in loyalty instead of cash. It's brilliant in its cruelty. And Henry absorbs every lesson. He starts running errands that matter. Delivering envelopes stuffed with cash to various locations across Brooklyn and Queens. He never asks what's inside. That's rule number 1. You don't ask questions. You just do what you're told and keep your mouth shut. The envelopes could contain payoffs to cops, bribes to union officials, protection money collected from local businesses. Henry doesn't need to know. He just needs to be reliable. And he is. Week after week, month after month, Henry proves himself. He's never late. He never loses a package. He never talks about what he sees or hears. In a world where loose lips can get you killed, Henry Hill becomes known as someone who understands the code, the unofficial rules that govern organized crime. Omerta, the vow of silence. Break it and you're dead. Simple as that. By age 13, Henry is making more money than his father. He's got cash in his pockets at all times. He starts buying things. Nice shoes. A leather jacket. He gives money to his mother. Tells her it's from his construction job. She takes it without asking too many questions because times are hard and 8 kids need to eat. His father knows better. His father sees what's happening. But what can he do? The men across the street have made it clear that Henry is under their protection now. Touching him means going to war with the Lucchese family. And that's not a war an electrician for Brooklyn can win. The cab stand becomes Henry's second home. Sometimes his first. He's there before the sun comes up, and he's there long after it goes down. He learns the rhythms of the operation. Morning is for collecting debts from the previous night's gambling. Afternoons are for planning. Who needs to be leaned on? Which trucks are worth hijacking? Which businesses are late on their protection payments? Evenings are when the money gets counted, when the envelopes get prepared for delivery up the chain of command. Henry watches it all. He's a ghost in the room, present but trusted enough to be there, but not important enough to be considered a threat. He meets the other young guys coming up through the ranks. Teenagers and 20-somethings who've chosen this life just like he has. They teach him things the older men won't. How to pick a lock. How to hotwire a car. How to spot an undercover cop from a block away. These skills feel like superpowers to a kid from Brownsville. Skills that separate him from the straight world. The civilian world. The boring world of people who follow rules and get nothing in return. But it's not all education and errands. There are moments of violence. Brief. Sudden. Brutal. Henry witnesses his first beating when he's 13 years old. a man who borrowed money and tried to skip town. They bring him to a warehouse near the docks. Henry is told to wait outside, but he hears everything. The pleading, the threats, the sound of fists and boots connecting with flesh and bone. When the man is dragged out, his face is unrecognizable. Henry feels sick, but he doesn't show it. Showing weakness in this world is dangerous. You swallow your fear. You bare your conscience. You become what they need you to be. And what they need is someone who won't flinch. The violence serves a purpose. It's not random. It's communication. A message sent to everyone else who might be thinking about stepping out of line. Pay your debts. Keep your promises. Respect the system. Or end up like that guy in the warehouse. It's medieval in its simplicity. And it works. Henry learns to compartmentalize. To separate his actions from his emotions. To do what needs to be done without thinking too hard about the consequences. It's a survival mechanism. A way to exist in a world that would crush anyone with a functioning conscience. He tells himself these men deserve what they get. They made choices. They knew the risks. And in a strange way, Henry starts to believe it. Starts to see the world through the same lens as the men who've adopted him. By 14, Henry has his own small crew of friends. Kids from the neighborhood who want what he has. The respect, the money, the sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. They're not official members of anything. They're too young, too untested. But they orbit around the cab stand like planets around the sun, hoping for scraps, hoping for a chance to prove themselves worthy. Paul Vario watches Henry closely during these years. He sees potential, not just as an errand boy, but as someone who could move up, someone who could handle bigger responsibilities. Vario starts giving Henry more complex tasks, delivering messages to other crews, picking up packages from locations Henry has never been to before. Each successful job is a test. Each test passed is another step deeper into the life. But there's a problem Henry doesn't fully understand yet, a problem that will define his entire existence in the mob. Henry Hill is not Italian, not fully. His mother is Sicilian, yes, but his father is Irish. And in the American Mafia of the 1950s, bloodline is everything. To become a made man, to be officially inducted into the family, you need to be 100% Italian. No exceptions. No negotiations. Henry can work for them. He can earn for them. He can kill for them, if necessary. But he can never truly be one of them. He'll always be an associate. Always on the outside looking in. Always one step removed from the real power. It's a glass ceiling built on ancestry. And there's nothing Henry can do about it. But he doesn't care. Not yet. Not at 14. Right now, he's living a life his father could never imagine. He's got money. He's got respect. He's got a family that isn't bound by blood, but by something stronger. Mutual benefit. Mutual fear. Mutual understanding that they're all in this together, and the only way out is prison or death. The cab stand operates with mechanical efficiency. Every day, the same faces, the same routines, the same careful choreography of crime, disguised as legitimate business. Cabs come and go. Dispatchers take calls. On the surface, it looks legal, but underneath is a machine that generates money through violence and intimidation. A machine that Henry Hill is now an essential part of. His mother worries. She's not stupid. She knows her son isn't working construction. She knows the men across the street are dangerous. But she also knows that Henry is eating well, dressing well, contributing to the household. In a neighborhood where poverty is the default setting, can she really complain? Should she? These are questions immigrant mothers in Brownsville ask themselves in whispers late at night. Questions without good answers. His siblings watch him with a mixture of envy and fear. They see the money. They see the confidence. But they also see how their father looks at Henry now, with something close to grief. Like he's mourning a son who's still alive, but already lost. The dinner table becomes a war zone of silence. Henry eats fast and leaves faster. There's nothing to say. They're living in parallel universes now. Same apartment. Different worlds. By the time Henry turns 15 in 1958, he's no longer a kid playing dress-up in a gangster's world. He's a working criminal. He's participated in hijackings. He's helped move stolen merchandise. He's collected debts from men twice his age. And he's learned the most important lesson of all. In this life, you're either the hammer or the nail. And Henry Hill has decided he's going to be the hammer. The Cabstand is his training ground. Paul Vario is his mentor. The Lucchese family is his future. And the straight world? The world of school books and 9-to-5 jobs and playing by the rules. That world is for suckers. That world is for his father. That world is for people who don't have the stomach or the smarts to take what they want. Henry Hill wants everything, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get it. Chapter 3, Army Interlude. 1960 arrives, and Henry Hill makes a decision that shocks everyone who knows him. At 17 years old, with 5 solid years of criminal apprenticeship under his belt, with money in his pockets and respect on the streets, Henry Hill joins the United States Army. Voluntarily. The kid who couldn't sit still in a classroom, who dropped out at 14, who's been running errands for the mob since he was 12, suddenly decides to serve his country in uniform. It makes no sense until you understand what happened in late 1957. The Appalachian Meeting, a gathering of Mafia bosses from across the country at the rural estate of Joseph Barbara in upstate New York. It was supposed to be secret, a summit to discuss territory and settle disputes and coordinate operations. But a sharp-eyed state trooper noticed too many expensive cars with out-of-state plates converging on a quiet town that never saw that kind of traffic. He called for backup. Within hours, law enforcement descended on the property like an invading army. 63 mobsters were arrested that day. Bosses and underbosses and captains from families across America. Men who'd spent decades operating in the shadows suddenly had their photographs in every newspaper from New York to California. The myth of the American Mafia, the thing law enforcement claimed didn't exist, was exposed in a single afternoon, and the fallout was catastrophic. Lists started circulating. 5,000 names of suspected associates. Federal investigators building cases. Grand juries convening. Wiretaps being installed. The heat wasn't just intense. It was existential. Guys who'd never spent a day in jail were suddenly facing indictments. Legitimate businesses were being scrutinized. Bank accounts frozen. The entire ecosystem of organized crime was under assault. Paul Vario's name didn't make the newspapers. He wasn't important enough yet to be at Appalachian. But he felt the pressure like everyone else. Meetings got canceled. Operations were put on hold. Guys stopped showing up at the Cabstand. The careful routine that had defined Henry's teenage years suddenly became chaotic and paranoid. Everyone was watching everyone else, wondering who might flip, who might wear a wire, who might decide that 20 years in prison wasn't worth the loyalty. Vario pulls Henry aside one afternoon in early 1960. The Cabstand is nearly empty. The usual crowd has scattered. Vario speaks in that calm, measured tone he always uses. The kind of voice that makes you lean in to listen. He tells Henry it might be smart to disappear for a while. Not forever. Just until things cool down. Until the feds move on to some other investigation. Until the heat becomes manageable again. He doesn't order Henry to leave. Vario never orders. He suggests. He advises. But Henry understands the subtext. Getting out of New York for a few years isn't just smart. It's survival. If the feds are building a case against Vario's crew, anyone associated with the Cabstand becomes a target. And Henry, despite his youth, has been around long enough to be on somebody's radar. Better to vanish now than to get caught up in something that could send him to prison before he's old enough to buy a legal drink. So Henry enlists. The army is perfect for what he needs. It's legitimate. It's patriotic. It's the kind of thing that makes parents proud and keeps federal investigators from paying attention. Who's going to suspect a kid serving his country of being a mobster? The uniform becomes camouflage. Not from the enemy. From the law. Basic training is hell for someone like Henry. He's used to autonomy. To making his own schedule. To being respected. Now he's just another recruit getting screamed at by drill sergeants who don't care that he's connected back in Brooklyn. They don't care that he's got friends in high places. Here, he's nothing. Less than nothing. He's a body that needs to be broken down and rebuilt into something useful for the United States military. Henry hates every minute of it. The early mornings. The physical conditioning. The endless repetition of tasks that seem designed purely to test obedience. He's not used to following orders from people he doesn't respect. In Vario's world, respect is earned through fear or loyalty or results. Here, respect comes from rank, from a stripe on a sleeve. It's arbitrary and it infuriates him. But he adapts, because adaptation is survival, and Henry Hill knows how to survive. He learns to keep his head down, to do what he's told without complaint, to blend into the machinery of military life the same way he blended into the background at the cab stand when important conversations were happening. He becomes invisible, competent but unremarkable, the kind of soldier who doesn't get noticed for good reasons or bad ones. What the Army doesn't know is that Henry never really leaves his old life behind. He can't. It's in his blood now. During his first leave, he goes straight back to Brooklyn, straight back to the cab stand. Nothing has changed, except the faces have gotten more cautious. The operation's more subtle. Vario is still there, still running things, still making money. The Appalachian investigation has led to some arrests, but the machine keeps functioning. It always does. You arrest one guy, and 3 more step up to fill the vacuum. Henry brings Army stories back to the neighborhood. Training exercises, fellow soldiers, places he's been stationed. But what he's really doing is checking in, letting Vario know he's still loyal, still interested, still waiting for the moment he can return permanently. And Vario appreciates it. He keeps Henry updated on crew business. Who's moving up? Who's gotten pinched? Who's making money? It's a lifeline for Henry, a reminder that his real life is waiting for him back in Brooklyn. The other soldiers have no idea who Henry really is. To them, he's just another working-class kid from New York who joined up because it beat working in a factory or driving a truck. They talk about girls and cars and what they're going to do when they get out. Henry talks about the same things, but his mind is always elsewhere, always calculating, always planning his return. During his 3 years in uniform, Henry learned some useful skills despite himself. Discipline, weapons training, how to follow a chain of command, how to work as part of a unit. These aren't things he thought he'd need, but they translate surprisingly well to mob life. The military and the Mafia operate on similar principles when you strip away the patriotism and the criminality. Hierarchy, loyalty, following orders without question, severe consequences for betrayal. He also learns patience, something he didn't have much of before. In the mob, things happen fast. A guy needs a beating, you beat him today. A truck needs hijacking, you hijack it tonight. But the military teaches him that some operations take time. That rushing leads to mistakes. That waiting for the right moment is often the difference between success and failure. It's a lesson that will serve him well in the years to come. Henry writes letters home, carefully worded letters that say nothing of substance, but maintain connections. His mother keeps everyone. His father reads them with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Maybe the Army will straighten him out. Maybe it will give him a different path. Maybe he'll come home and get a real job and leave those men across the street behind. It's wishful thinking, and on some level his father knows it. But hope is a powerful drug for parents watching their children make terrible choices. The truth is Henry counts the days until his discharge like a prisoner marking time on a cell wall. Every day in uniform is a day away from where he wants to be, away from the money, the action, the respect. He's not here to become a better person. He's here to wait out the storm. And the storm is finally starting to pass. By 1963, the Appalachian fallout has settled into a new normal. Some guys went to prison. Most didn't. The families reorganized. The operations continued. Federal heat moved on to other targets. Cuba, the Soviets, civil rights movements. The mob slipped back into the shadows where it operates best. And Henry's discharge papers finally come through. He's 20 years old. He served 3 years in the Army without incident. He's got an honorable discharge and a clean record. On paper, he's a veteran who deserves respect and opportunity. In reality, he's a mobster who's been in exile, and he's coming home hungry. The bus ride back to Brooklyn feels longer than any deployment. Henry stares out the window, watching America roll past. Small towns, industrial cities, farmland, all of it meaningless to him. His America is 5 square miles of Brooklyn. That's his country. That's where his allegiance lies. When he finally walks back into the cab stand in his civilian clothes with his duffel bag over his shoulder, Paul Vario is sitting in the same chair he was sitting in 3 years ago. Like time hasn't moved. Like Henry never left. Vario looks up, smiles, offers his hand. Welcome back. 2 words. That's all it takes. Henry's exile is over. His real life is beginning again. And this time, there's no basic training. No drill sergeants. No rules except the ones that matter. The Army gave him discipline and patience and weapons training. The mob is about to give him opportunity. Within days, Henry is back in the rotation, running errands, making deliveries, picking up where he left off. Except he's not picking up where he left off, because 3 years have passed, and he's not a kid anymore. He's a man with military experience, a man who's proven he can keep his mouth shut even when he's 1,000 miles away from the people who could hurt him for talking. That kind of loyalty is rare. That kind of reliability is valuable. Vario starts giving him bigger jobs almost immediately. Henry's not just delivering envelopes anymore. He's participating in hijackings, real operations with real risk and real rewards. The Army taught him how to follow orders and work as part of a team. Now he's using those skills to steal trucks full of merchandise that will get fenced through a network of crooked warehouses and discount stores across the city. His first hijacking is a cigarette truck. Simple target. Driver who's been paid to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The truck gets diverted to a warehouse. The cargo gets unloaded. The cigarettes get distributed through Vario's network. Henry's cut is $5,000. More money than he made in a year working for the Army. And it took 6 hours from start to finish. This is what he's been waiting for. This is what 3 years in uniform bought him. Not a better future. A better criminal career. The Army was never going to save Henry Hill. It was never meant to. It was just a place to hide until the coast was clear. And now the coast is clear and Henry Hill is back where he belongs. In the life. In the action. In the only world that's ever made sense to him. And this time, he's not sweeping floors or making coffee. This time, he's earning. Really earning. The kind of money that makes you dangerous. The kind of money that makes you important. The kind of money that makes you a target. Chapter 4. Return to the life. The cigarette truck hijacking changes everything. $5,000 for 6 hours of work. Henry Hill is 20 years old, and he's just made more money than most men in Brownsville make in a year of legitimate labor. He holds that cash in his hands and feels the weight of it. Not just the physical weight, the psychological weight. This is what power feels like. This is what freedom looks like. Green paper that opens doors and commands respect and proves that the 3 years he spent in Army exile weren't wasted. He came back at exactly the right moment. Paul Vario watches Henry closely during these first few months back. Vario is a student of human nature. He's built his criminal empire on his ability to read people. To know who can be trusted and who will crack under pressure. To identify talent before anyone else does. And what he sees in Henry Hill is someone who's evolved. The eager kid who swept floors is gone. In his place is a young man who understands patience and timing. Who's learned discipline without losing his hunger. The Army didn't reform Henry. It refined him. Within weeks, Henry is working full-time for the crew again. Not as an errand boy. As an active participant in operations that generate serious money. Vario runs his organization like a corporation. Different divisions handling different revenue streams. Gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, hijacking. Each operation requires personnel who understand their role and execute without drama. Henry slots into the hijacking crew like he was born for it. The operation is elegant in its simplicity. You identify targets worth stealing. Trucks carrying high-value merchandise that can be moved quickly through underground markets. Cigarettes, alcohol, electronics, designer clothing, pharmaceuticals, items that people want and will buy without asking questions about where they came from. Then you identify the weak link in the supply chain, usually the driver. Guys making $12 an hour to haul $100,000 worth of cargo across state lines. Guys with gambling debts or mistresses or drug habits. Guys who can be bought. You approach them carefully. Feel them out. Make it clear that cooperation pays better than loyalty to some faceless corporation that barely knows their name. Most drivers fold immediately. The ones who don't, you find another target. Violence is expensive and attracts attention. Better to find someone willing to play ball than to force the issue. And there's always someone willing to play ball. Once you've got the driver, the rest is choreography. The truck takes a wrong turn. Ends up at a warehouse nobody's watching. The cargo gets unloaded by a crew wearing gloves and moving fast. Within an hour, the truck is found abandoned in some industrial parking lot. The driver gives a statement to police about being forced off the road by armed men. Everyone knows he's lying. Nobody can prove it. The insurance company pays out. The corporation eats the loss. The merchandise ends up in discount stores and corner bodegas across 3 states. And the crew splits the profit. Henry's role varies depending on a job. Sometimes he's surveillance, watching the target location for days to identify patterns. When trucks arrive, when security changes shifts, when the warehouse is most vulnerable. Other times he's part of the crew doing the actual unloading. Physical labor that needs to happen fast and quiet. And occasionally, he's the one making contact with the driver, the face of the operation, the guy who makes the pitch and negotiates the payout. He's good at all of it. The surveillance requires patience he learned in the Army. Sitting in a car for 12 hours watching nothing happen until finally something does. The physical work is easy. He's young and strong and motivated by the promise of a payday. But the negotiation? That's where Henry discovers a natural talent. He knows how to read people, how to find their pressure points. He doesn't threaten, doesn't need to. He just lays out the reality in a way that makes cooperation seem like the obvious choice. You can make $5,000 for looking the other way. Or you can be loyal to a company that would replace you tomorrow without blinking. What's it going to be? The drivers almost always take the money. Between hijackings, Henry reconnects with old friends from the neighborhood. Guys who stayed straight and now work legitimate jobs. Construction, delivery services, sanitation. They meet for drinks, and the conversation always turns to money. They complain about their paychecks, about their bosses, about how hard they work for so little. Henry listens and says nothing about what he does. But he picks up the tab, every time, and they notice. They see his clothes, his car, the roll of cash he carries. They ask questions he deflects with jokes. But the message is clear. Henry's life is better than theirs. Easier, more lucrative. Some of them want in. They ask if there's work, if they can get connected, if Henry can introduce them to the right people. He's careful about who he brings around. Vario taught him that. You vouch for someone and they screw up, it's on you. Your reputation is your currency in this world. Spend it foolishly and you're worthless. So Henry only recommends guys he's known since childhood. Guys he trusts not to panic when things get complicated. Because things always get complicated eventually. One of those guys is Tommy DeSimone. They grew up on the same block. Played in the same streets. Tommy's got Sicilian blood on both sides, which means he can become a made man someday. Something Henry can never be. But that's years away. Right now, Tommy is just another hungry kid looking to earn. He's wild, though. Got a temper that ignites without warning. The kind of guy who takes disrespect personally and responds with fists before his brain has time to calculate consequences. It makes him dangerous, but it also makes him useful. Because sometimes you need someone willing to do things that others won't. Henry introduces Tommy to the crew. Vario approves. And just like that, Henry's got a partner. Someone his own age who understands a life the same way he does. They work hijackings together. Split paydays. Spend money in the same bars and nightclubs that cater to connected guys. Places where the owner comps drinks and the bartenders know to keep their mouths shut about who they see and what they overhear. The money flows like water. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Some weeks Henry pulls in more cash than his father made in a year. He still lives at home, but he's barely there. Just a place to sleep between jobs. His mother stopped asking questions years ago. His siblings watch him with a mixture of awe and resentment. They're still living paycheck to paycheck. And Henry's walking around like he owns the city. In 1965, Henry meets Karen Friedman at a party. She's Jewish, middle class, the kind of girl who has no idea what Henry really does for a living. He tells her he works in construction, that he's got opportunities, that he's going places. It's not entirely a lie. He's going places, just not the kind of places you discuss with a girl from a nice family. But Karen is drawn to him, to his confidence, his money, the way people treat him when they walk into restaurants. She doesn't ask too many questions, and Henry doesn't volunteer too many answers. They get married quickly. Henry's 22. Karen's 20. They move into an apartment in a neighborhood where nobody knows his background, where he can play the role of a legitimate businessman. Karen decorates, cooks, talks about having kids someday. Henry goes to work every day, except his work is hijacking trucks and collecting gambling debts and doing favors for Paul Vario that he never tells his wife about. The double life feels natural to Henry. He's been practicing it since he was 12. One face for the civilians, another for the crew. Karen gets the version of Henry who takes her to dinner and buys her jewelry and promises a future that looks normal from the outside. The crew gets the version who will do whatever needs to be done without hesitation. Neither version is complete. Both versions are real, but maintaining the facade requires money. Lots of it. The apartment, the car, the restaurants, the appearance of success. It all costs. And Henry's not content with the income from hijackings anymore. He wants more, needs more. The problem with making good money is that good money stops feeling like enough. You adjust to the lifestyle. The lifestyle demands more income. More income requires more risk. It's a cycle that accelerates until you're so deep you can't remember what normal life looked like. Vario recognizes Henry's ambition and feeds it. He brings Henry deeper into the operation, introduces him to other made men in the Lucchese family, guys with more power and more connections and access to bigger scores. Henry meets Jimmy Burke, Irish like Henry's father, but connected to the Lucchese family through decades of earning. Burke is a legend in certain circles, a career criminal who's pulled off some of the most profitable hijackings in New York history. He's methodical, patient, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. Burke sees potential in Henry, the same thing Vario saw years ago. Someone who's smart enough to plan, but hungry enough to execute. Someone who won't quit when things get difficult. Burke starts bringing Henry on more complex jobs. Not just hijackings, but full-scale robberies that require planning and coordination and nerves of steel. The paydays are bigger. $20,000, $30,000. Splits that make Henry feel invincible. In 1967, Burke presents Henry with an opportunity that will change everything. Air France operates a cargo facility at Kennedy Airport. Every day, planes arrive carrying merchandise from Europe. High-end goods, currency, valuables being shipped to stores and banks across America. The security is tight, but not impossible. And Burke has an inside man, someone who works in the cargo facility and knows the schedules and the blind spots and exactly when the most valuable shipments arrive. The job requires a crew of 6. Burke, Henry, Tommy DeSimone, 3 others who've proven themselves on smaller operations. They spend weeks planning, studying the facility, timing security patrols, identifying escape routes. This isn't a random hijacking. This is a military operation disguised as a robbery. And the potential take, over $400,000. More money than Henry has ever seen. More money than he imagined possible from a single job. The night of the robbery, Henry feels something he hasn't felt in years. Fear. Real fear. Not the nervous energy before a hijacking, but genuine terror at what could go wrong. They're robbing an international airline at one of the busiest airports in the world. If this goes sideways, people die or go to prison for decades. There's no middle ground. But the fear is intoxicating. It sharpens his focus, makes every detail crystal clear. This is what he was born for. This moment, this risk, this insane gamble that could set him up for life or destroy him completely. They hit the facility just after midnight. Masks, guns, moving with precision that comes from endless rehearsal. The inside man has disabled the alarm. The security guards are controlled with a minimum of violence. The crew moves through the facility like they own it. loading currency and merchandise into a truck that's waiting exactly where it's supposed to be. 11 minutes from entry to exit. Clean. Professional. Perfect. The take is $420,000. Split 6 ways. Henry's cut is $70,000. More money than his father will make in a decade. More money than Henry thought existed when he was sweeping floors at the Cabstand 12 years ago. He holds his share and realizes something profound. He's not just a criminal anymore. He's a successful criminal. The kind that makes the newspapers. The kind that other crews talk about with respect. The kind that Paul Vario and Jimmy Burke trust with their most important operations. Henry Hill is 24 years old, and he's arrived. He's got money, status, a wife who thinks he's legitimate, a crew that treats him like family, and a future that seems limitless as long as he keeps his mouth shut and follows the rules. The rules that govern this secret world he's chosen. The rules that keep everyone rich and free and alive. Chapter 5. The Golden Years. $70,000 changes a man. Not just what he owns, but how he sees himself. Henry Hill walks out of that Air France job in 1967, and he's no longer just another associate grinding for scraps. He's an earner, a player, someone who gets called for the big jobs because he's proven he won't fold when the pressure mounts. And in the world of organized crime, reputation is the only currency that matters more than cash. The money goes fast. That's the thing about criminal income. It burns through your hands like you're trying to hold fire. Henry buys a new car, a Cadillac, black with chrome that catches sunlight like a mirror. In Brownsville, driving a car like that sends a message. You're connected. You're successful. You're someone who matters. Karen loves it. She has no idea that the car costs more than most people's annual salary. She just knows her husband is doing well in construction. Real well. The apartment gets upgraded too. They move to a better neighborhood. More space. Better furniture. Karen decorates with the enthusiasm of someone who believes this is what success looks like. Normal success. The kind built on hard work and smart decisions. Henry lets her believe it. What's she going to do with the truth? The truth would shatter the illusion, and Henry needs that illusion. Needs a place where he can pretend to be something other than what he is. But most of the money goes into the lifestyle. The restaurants. The clubs. The constant parade of nights that blur together into a montage of excess. Henry and Tommy DeSimone become fixtures at mob-connected establishments across Brooklyn and Queens. Places where made men gather to conduct business over expensive meals and cheaper women. Where cash changes hands under tables and nobody asks questions about where it came from. Henry picks up tabs for entire tables. Orders bottles of wine he can't pronounce. Tips waiters $100 for bringing bread. It's performance. Theater designed to project success and power. And it works. Paul Vario watches this transformation with the pride of a father watching his son graduate. Henry has become exactly what Vario hoped he'd become. A reliable earner who understands the rules and generates income without creating problems. Vario brings Henry into more operations. Not just hijackings now. Loan sharking, gambling, labor racketeering. The full spectrum of Lucchese family business. Each operation requires a different skill set, and Henry proves adaptable to all of them. The loan sharking is particularly lucrative. The concept is medieval but effective. Someone needs money fast. A gambling debt, a business expense, medical bills, whatever. Banks won't touch them because they're high risk, but Vario will. He'll loan $50,000 today, except it's not really a loan. It's a trap. The interest is 5 points a week. That's 5%. Every week. Compound. Do the math, and it's criminal. Which is exactly what it is. But desperate people don't do math. They just see $50,000 that solves their immediate problem. What they don't see is the long-term nightmare. That $50,000 becomes $52,500 after 1 week. $55,125 after 2 weeks. The numbers grow like a tumor. And when they can't pay, that's when guys like Henry show up. Not with violence. Not at first. With conversation. With understanding. With solutions that sound reasonable until you realize what you're agreeing to. You can't pay. No problem. You got a business? Great. We'll send some guys to work there. They'll be on your payroll, but they won't actually work. You'll just pay them. Consider it interest. Or maybe you've got access to merchandise. Trucks coming and going from a warehouse you manage. You just look the other way at the right time. That's all. Just look the other way. Suddenly the debt gets paid in favors instead of cash. And the person who took the loan is now an accomplice. Complicit. Trapped. Henry collects from dozens of people every week. Businessmen. Bookies. Gamblers who thought they could beat the odds. He walks into their establishments with a smile, and they hand over envelopes of cash like it's rent. Because it is rent. They're renting their continued existence. Their ability to operate without problems. Henry takes the money and delivers it up the chain. Vario gets his cut. The family gets theirs. And Henry keeps what's left, which is still substantial. But it's the hijackings that Henry loves most. There's an art to it. A precision that appeals to something deep in his personality. The planning phase alone can take weeks. Identifying the target. Learning the route. Finding the driver's weakness. Then the execution. The adrenaline rush of pulling it off. The satisfaction of watching a truck full of merchandise get unloaded and disappeared into the underground economy within hours. It feels like beating the system. Like outsmarting the entire legitimate world. Jimmy Burke becomes Henry's primary partner in these operations. Burke is a decade older and infinitely more experienced. He's been hijacking trucks since before Henry was born. He knows every angle, every potential problem, how to maximize profit and minimize risk. Burke operates with cold calculation that borders on genius. He never rushes, never takes unnecessary chances. Every job is planned down to the minute, and it shows in the success rate. Burke's crew rarely fails, and when they do succeed, they succeed big. Tommy DeSimone rounds out the core trio. If Burke is the brain and Henry is the coordinator, Tommy is the muscle, the enforcer, the guy who makes things happen through intimidation when persuasion fails. Tommy's got a reputation for violence that precedes him. He's killed people. Everyone knows it. Nobody talks about it. But the knowledge hangs in the air when Tommy walks into a room. Drivers cooperate because they're afraid of Tommy. Debtors pay because Tommy might show up next time. Fear is a tool, and Tommy wields it like a craftsman. The three of them form a machine that generates money with industrial efficiency. Burke plans the jobs. Henry coordinates the details. Tommy provides enforcement. They split the profits and reinvest in the lifestyle that defines mob success. Cars, clothes, jewelry, everything visual, everything designed to broadcast wealth and power. Because in this world, perception becomes reality. Look successful, and people treat you like you're successful. Act like you're untouchable, and people believe you're untouchable. Henry's marriage to Karen exists in a parallel universe. She's pregnant by 1968, their first child on the way. She's building a nest, talking about schools and neighborhoods, and all the things young mothers talk about when they're planning a future. Henry nods and agrees and writes checks for whatever she needs. But his mind is always somewhere else. On the next job, the next score, the next opportunity to prove himself to the people who actually matter in his life. Karen knows something's wrong. She's not stupid. She sees the hours he keeps, the phone calls at odd times, the way certain people treat him with deference that doesn't make sense for a construction worker. But she doesn't push. Maybe she doesn't want to know. Maybe she's content with the lifestyle, even if the source is questionable. Maybe she's trapped by her own complicity, spending money she suspects isn't earned legally, but enjoying it too much to ask questions. Their daughter Gina is born in 1968. Henry holds her in the hospital and feels something unexpected. Love. Real love that has nothing to do with money or power or respect. Just pure biological connection to this tiny human who depends on him completely. It scares him, because caring about something means it can be used against you. Means you have a weakness, and weakness in his world gets exploited. But the fear doesn't change his behavior. He's too deep, too committed. The life isn't just what he does. It's who he is. Being a father is something that happens in the margins. The brief hours between jobs when he goes home and plays the role of husband and dad. Then the phone rings and he's gone again. Back to the restaurants, the clubs, the crew, Back to the only family that really understands him. Paul Vario treats Henry like a son by this point. Better than a son, because sons inherit through blood. Associates earn through performance. And Henry performs brilliantly. Week after week, month after month, generating income and solving problems and proving his value over and over. Vario rewards this loyalty with access. He brings Henry to meetings with other made men, introduces him around, opens doors that stay closed to most associates. It's as close to being made as someone with Irish blood can get. The Lucchese family operates like a shadow government. They control unions, infiltrate legitimate businesses, collect tribute from anyone operating in their territory. Construction companies pay. Restaurants pay. Trucking companies pay. Everyone pays. It's a tax system without the pretense of providing services. You pay for the privilege of operating without problems. And if you don't pay, problems arrive. Fires, vandalism, violence. The message is clear. Pay or suffer. Henry participates in this system without moral conflict. He doesn't see himself as a criminal. He sees himself as a businessman operating in a gray market that exists because people want things they can't get legally. Stolen merchandise at discount prices. Loans that banks won't provide. Gambling on sports. Prostitution. Drugs. The demand exists whether the mob supplies it or not. They're just meeting market needs. That's how Henry justifies it. That's how they all justify it. By 1970, Henry's pulling in $40,000 a month. Some months more. The numbers are staggering for someone who's 27 years old with no formal education. His father made $12,000 a year as an electrician and felt lucky to have it. Henry spent that much on clothes, on meals, on showing off for people whose respect he craves. The money is both a blessing and a curse. It validates his choices, proves that dropping out of school and joining the mob was the right decision. But it also creates expectations, obligations, debts that aren't financial but social. When you're making that kind of money in the mob, you're expected to share, to invest in other operations, to loan money to guys who need a stake for their own jobs, to bail people out when they get arrested, to support families of guys who are doing time. It's a communal system disguised as capitalism. Everyone earns, but everyone contributes. And if you're not contributing enough, you're not earning enough. So you take more risks, pull more jobs, generate more income. The cycle accelerates. Their son Greg is born in 1969. 2 kids now, a wife, a home. The trappings of legitimate middle-class life built on a foundation of crime. Henry loves his children in a distant, abstract way. He provides for them, buys them things, shows up for birthdays and holidays. But he's not present. Not really. His body is there, but his mind is always somewhere else. Calculating, planning, worrying about the next job or the last one, wondering who might be cooperating with the FBI, who might be wearing a wire, who might be the weak link that brings everything crashing down. Because that's the thing about the golden years. They feel permanent when you're living them. Like the money will always flow and the cops will always be one step behind and your luck will never run out. But underneath the surface, cracks are forming. Guys are getting arrested, making deals. The FBI is developing new techniques. Wiretaps, surveillance, informants. The game is changing and Henry's too drunk on success to notice. The crew keeps pulling jobs, keeps making money, keeps living like kings in a kingdom built on stolen merchandise and violence and corruption. And for a while it works. For a few golden years, Henry Hill has everything he wanted since he was 12 years old watching those men in suits outside the cab stand. He has respect. He has money. He has power. He has a family in both the biological and criminal sense. What he doesn't have is security. Because security doesn't exist in this world. You're only as safe as your last job. Only as protected as your current value. And the moment you stop being useful, you become a liability. A problem that needs solving. Henry understands this intellectually, but he doesn't feel it. Not yet. He's too young, too successful, too convinced of his own importance. The golden years shine bright, but gold doesn't last forever, especially when it's stolen. Chapter 6, Behind Bars. 1972, shatters the illusion. Henry Hill is 29 years old, and he makes a mistake. Not a small mistake. Not the kind you can smooth over with cash or a favor. The kind of mistake that ends with handcuffs and a judge and years of your life disappearing behind concrete walls and razor wire. It starts with a gambler. There's always a gambler. Guys in Vario's operation for $30,000. Big debt, but not unmanageable for someone who owns a business or has assets. This guy is neither. Just promises and excuses, and the kind of desperation that makes people do stupid things. Henry's been collecting from him for months. 500 here, 1,000 there. Payments that barely cover the interest, while the principal keeps growing like a cancer. One afternoon, the gambler doesn't have the payment. Not even a partial. Just apologies and explanations about cash flow, and next week for sure. Henry's heard it before. They've all heard it before. It's the song desperate men sing when they're drowning. Usually you apply pressure. Make threats. Remind them what happens to people who don't pay. But this guy has a sister. And the sister works for the FBI. Henry doesn't know this. Nobody knows this. It's not something the gambler advertised. But when Henry loses his temper and beats the guy bloody in his own living room, when he breaks the guy's nose and cracks 2 ribs and leaves him choking on his own blood, the gambler doesn't call the police. He calls his sister. And his sister makes one phone call that changes everything. The arrest happens 3 days later. Federal agents. Not local cops who can be reasoned with or paid off. Federal agents who've been building a case against Vario's crew for months and were just waiting for the right excuse. Assault. Extortion. Operating an illegal gambling operation. The charges stack up like a house of cards, except this house doesn't fall. It stands. Documented. Witnessed. Prosecutable. Henry gets bail. $20,000. Vario fronts it without hesitation. That's how the system works. You take care of your people when they're in trouble. You post bail. You pay for lawyers. You make sure they know they're not alone. Because a guy who feels abandoned is a guy who might start talking to prosecutors. And talk is what destroys organizations. Not violence. Not competition. Betrayal. So you invest in loyalty. You make sure everyone understands that standing up means getting rewarded. The trial is a foregone conclusion. The evidence is overwhelming. The gambler testifies. His sister testifies. Bank records show a pattern of payments that can't be explained as anything legitimate. Henry's lawyer does what he can, but there's no defense for beating a man half to death over a gambling debt. The jury deliberates for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentences Henry to 10 years in federal prison. 10 years. A decade. Henry's 29. He'll be 39 when he gets out if he serves the full sentence. His daughter Gina will be a teenager. His son Greg will be in middle school. Karen will be 40. An entire life will happen without him. But that's not what Henry thinks about when the marshals take him into custody. He thinks about maintaining his status. About showing strength. About proving to everyone watching that prison doesn't break Henry Hill. The bus ride to the Federal Correctional Institution feels longer than any deployment he did in the Army. Except this time there's no discharge date to count down to. Just good behavior and parole boards and the grinding uncertainty of the appeals process. Henry stares out the window at freedom disappearing behind him and realizes something profound. This is part of the job. Prison isn't an aberration. It's a cost of doing business. Every mobster does time eventually. It's expected. Almost required. You can't really be respected in the life until you've done a stretch. Proven you can handle it. Proven you won't break. The facility is minimum security. Federal prison for white-collar criminals and nonviolent offenders. Which is a joke because everyone knows organized crime figures are anything but nonviolent. But they get classified based on the charges they're convicted of, not the crimes everyone knows they committed. So Henry ends up in a place that's more like a college campus than a maximum security hellhole. Dormitory-style housing. Recreation facilities. A library. Jobs that pay pennies but give you something to do besides count the hours. What Henry discovers immediately is that prison operates on the same principles as the street. Hierarchy. Respect. Money. Except the currency is different. Cigarettes. Favors. Access to contraband. And connected guys like Henry arrive with built-in status. The guards know who he is, who he works for. They know that causing problems for Henry means causing problems for Paul Vario. And causing problems for Paul Vario means causing problems for themselves or their families. So Henry gets treated differently. Better. Cell assignments that are more private. Work details that are less grueling. Access to phones at times when other inmates aren't allowed. It's corruption at a cellular level. Guards on Vario's payroll making $20,000 a year, supplementing their income with cash payments to look the other way. To deliver messages. To smuggle in food from outside. Real food. Not prison cafeteria garbage, but steaks and pasta and wine smuggled in bottles that officially don't exist. Henry eats better in prison than most people eat free. Sleeps better. Has more privileges than guards who are theoretically in charge. Within weeks, Henry's cell becomes a social club. Other connected guys gather there after work details. They play cards, share food, conduct business like they're in a restaurant instead of a federal facility. An actual business gets done because prison doesn't stop the operations on the outside. It just requires different communication methods. Messages get passed through lawyers, through visitors, through guards who will relay information for the right price. Henry stays plugged into Vario's crew, even behind bars. He meets guys from other families. Gambino, Colombo, Bonanno, Genovese. All the major New York organizations have representatives doing time for various crimes. And in prison, the usual territorial disputes don't apply. Everyone's facing the same enemy, the same system. So there's cooperation, information sharing, networking that will pay dividends when everyone gets out. Henry makes connections that will open doors later, learns about operations in other cities, develops relationships with people who can move merchandise or provide services that Vario's crew doesn't handle. The most important connection Henry makes is with drug dealers. Not street-level guys, but serious operators moving serious weight. Cocaine, heroin, marijuana. Quantities measured in kilograms and pounds rather than grams and ounces. These guys are serving long sentences. 10 years. 15. 20. They're not getting out anytime soon. But they still have contacts on the outside. Networks that continue operating while they're incarcerated. And they need partners. People who can move product. People with distribution channels already in place. Henry listens. Learns. Takes mental notes about suppliers and prices and profit margins that make hijacking trucks look like amateur hour. A successful hijacking might net $50,000 for a crew of 6. That's $8,000 per person before expenses. Good money. But cocaine? You invest $20,000 in product and move it for $60,000. $40,000 profit from one transaction. And you can do multiple transactions per week if you've got the distribution network. It's tempting. Incredibly tempting. But it's also forbidden. Paul Vario has a strict rule about drugs. Nobody in his crew deals. It brings too much attention. Too much federal scrutiny. Local cops might look the other way for hijackings and gambling. Federal agencies don't play that game with narcotics. One drug arrest can bring down an entire organization through conspiracy charges and aggressive prosecution. So Vario's rule is absolute. Stay away from drugs or get out of the crew. Henry files the information away for later. Doesn't commit to anything. Just listens and learns and builds relationships. Because that's what prison is really for. Networking. Education. Building a curriculum vitae of criminal contacts that will be valuable upon release. It's like graduate school for organized crime. You go in knowing how to hijack trucks. You come out knowing how to move cocaine internationally. Karen visits every week. She brings the kids when she can. They sit in the visiting room, surrounded by other families maintaining ties to incarcerated men. Gina's 4 years old and doesn't understand why Daddy lives here now. Greg's 3 and cries every time they have to leave. Karen holds it together during the visits. Smiles. Talks about home and the neighborhood and her mother's cooking. Normal things designed to maintain normalcy. Then she goes home and cries. Henry knows this. Knows his choices have consequences that extend beyond himself. But knowing doesn't change anything. Doesn't make him reconsider his path. Just makes him more determined to make money when he gets out. To compensate his family for this lost time with financial security. Time moves differently in prison. Days blur together. Weeks become months. Seasons change outside walls he can barely see. Henry marks time through visits and phone calls and letters from the outside. Vario writes regularly. Nothing incriminating. Just coded messages about construction jobs and business opportunities. Everyone knows the mail gets read. The phones get monitored. So you speak in metaphors. In references only the intended recipient understands. It's a language unto itself. Henry gets transferred twice during his sentence. Different facilities as space becomes available or security classifications change. Each transfer means losing the privileges he's built up. The relationships with guards. The cell arrangements. The social structure. Then he has to rebuild it all. Prove his connections. Re-establish his status. It's exhausting but necessary. Because without status, prison becomes dangerous. You're just another inmate. Vulnerable. Forgettable. The drug conversations continue. Different guys at different facilities, but the same basic pitch. The money's incredible. The risk is manageable if you're smart. The demand is endless. America is developing an appetite for cocaine that can't be satisfied fast enough. Middle-class professionals snorting lines at parties. Blue-collar workers looking for energy to work double shifts. Musicians. Athletes. Housewives. Everyone's a potential customer. The market is exploding, and the guys who get in early will make fortunes that dwarf anything possible through traditional mob rackets. Henry listens. His mind does the math. Compares what he's making through Vario's crew to what he could make moving product. The numbers are staggering. Life-changing. Generational wealth kind of numbers. But there's still Vario's rule. Still the prohibition. Still the understanding that crossing that line means exile from the only family that matters. By 1976, Henry served 4 years. Good behavior gets him paroled early. 4 years of a 10-year sentence. The parole board reviews his case and sees a model prisoner. Work assignments completed. No disciplinary incidents. Participating in rehabilitation programs. They don't see the underground operations. The contraband smuggling. The business relationships built on criminal enterprise. They see what Henry wants them to see. A reformed man ready to rejoin society as a productive citizen. The day of his release, Paul Vario is waiting outside, sitting in a Cadillac, smoking a cigar, smiling like Henry's returning for vacation instead of prison. He opens the door. Welcome home. 2 words that mean everything. Because home isn't Brooklyn or his apartment or even his family. Home is the crew, the life, the world he never really left, even when he was locked up. They drive to a restaurant. Vario's arranged a party. Everyone's there. Tommy, Jimmy Burke, dozens of associates and connected guys. They eat. They drink. They celebrate Henry's return. But underneath the celebration is calculation. 4 years is a long time. The operations have evolved. New guys have moved up. The hierarchy has shifted. Henry needs to prove himself all over again. Needs to show he's still valuable. Still hungry. Still willing to do whatever it takes. And he is. More than ever. Because prison taught him something Vario never could. Taught him that the system can take your freedom anytime it wants. That the rules everyone follows are just agreements that can be broken when convenient. That the only security comes from having enough money to insulate yourself from consequences. Henry Hill walks out of prison with new contacts, new ideas, and new appetites that will eventually destroy everything he's built. But right now, he's just happy to be free. Happy to be home. Happy to get back to earning. The golden years are behind him. The desperate years are coming. But first, there's one more score to pull. One more heist that will make history. One more job that everyone will remember. And it's already being planned. Chapter 7. The Lufthansa Heist. Planning. 1978. 2 years after Henry Hill walks out of federal prison. 2 years of rebuilding his position in the crew. 2 years of proving he hasn't lost his edge. 2 years of watching money flow through operations he helped orchestrate while wondering if there's something bigger out there. Something that could set him up for life. Something that could make him a legend. The answer walks into Robert's Lounge on a humid afternoon in July. Robert's Lounge is Jimmy Burke's bar in Ozone Park, Queens. It's not really a bar in the traditional sense. It's a headquarters disguised as a neighborhood watering hole. The kind of place where connected guys gather to conduct business without saying anything that could be used in court. Where trucks get hijacked in conversation over coffee. Where problems get solved with handshakes and threats delivered with smiles. Burke owns it, operates it, uses it as the nerve center for his operation within the Lucchese family structure. The man who walks in that afternoon is Martin Krugman. Marty, a bookmaker who runs a wig shop as a front for his gambling operation. He's got connections to various crews, but he's not made. Not connected in the way that matters. He's a facilitator, a guy who knows people and moves information and occasionally stumbles onto opportunities he can't exploit alone. And today, he's stumbled onto something massive. Marty's been talking to a guy named Louis Werner. Werner works for Lufthansa Airlines at Kennedy Airport. Not a pilot or executive. A cargo supervisor. The kind of guy nobody notices. The kind who punches a clock and goes home and leads a life so ordinary it's invisible. Except Louis Werner has a problem. Actually, he has several problems. Gambling debts. Serious gambling debts. $20,000 serious. The kind of debt that grows teeth and starts biting when you can't pay. Werner's been trying to scrape together the money for months. Borrowing from friends. Selling possessions. Getting deeper into the hole every week. But Werner has something valuable. Information. Access. Knowledge about how Lufthansa's cargo operation works. And more importantly, knowledge about what comes through that cargo facility on a regular basis. Currency. American dollars that have been exchanged in Germany by servicemen and tourists. Cash that gets flown back to the United States and sits in a vault at Kennedy Airport waiting to be picked up by armored trucks and delivered to banks. Millions of dollars. Just sitting there. Protected by security that's designed to look intimidating, but is actually vulnerable if you know the weak points. Werner tells Krugman about it. Not as a robbery proposal. Just as conversation. Just venting about how unfair it is that he's drowning in debt while millions of dollars sit 20 feet from his desk. Krugman listens with the attention of a man who's built a career on recognizing opportunities. He asks questions. Careful questions. How much cash? What does it arrive? How long does it stay in the facility? Who has access? Werner answers without realizing he's providing a blueprint for a robbery. Krugman brings this information to Henry Hill. They meet at a diner in Brooklyn. Public place. Lots of noise. Impossible to surveil effectively. Krugman lays out what he knows. A Lufthansa cargo supervisor with gambling debts and inside access. Shipments of currency that arrive predictably. A vault that holds millions. Henry listens and does the math. If Werner's telling the truth, this could be the biggest cash robbery in American history. But it's also incredibly risky. Kennedy Airport isn't some warehouse in Brooklyn. It's federal property. International commerce. The kind of target that brings every law enforcement agency in the tri-state area down on whoever's responsible. Henry tells Krugman he needs to talk to Jimmy Burke. This is too big for conversation over coffee. Too complex for anything but Burke's methodical planning and decades of experience. Burke has pulled jobs that other crews only talk about. He's hijacked trucks carrying millions in merchandise. Robbed warehouses that were supposed to be impenetrable. He's a criminal architect. And if this Lufthansa job is real, if it's actually possible, Burke's the only person who can make it happen. They meet at Robert's Lounge the next evening. Burke, Henry, Krugman, Tommy DeSimone, and Paul Vario. Because a job this size requires approval from the top. You don't rob an international airline without getting permission from your capo. Vario listens to Krugman's pitch, asks questions that cut through the excitement, and focus on logistics. How reliable is Werner? Can he be trusted? What's the security situation? Where are the escape routes? What's the heat going to be like after? Krugman doesn't have all the answers. He's a bookmaker, not a planner. But he's got Werner's phone number, and Werner is desperate enough to talk. Vario tells Burke to investigate. Do reconnaissance. See if this is a real opportunity or just a gambler's fantasy. And if it's real, if it's actually possible, then plan it properly. No rushing. No shortcuts. This is the kind of job that gets planned for months. The kind where every detail matters because one mistake means life in prison or worse. Burke takes the assignment like a general preparing for war. He starts with Werner. A meeting arranged through Krugman at a diner near the airport. Burke doesn't threaten, doesn't need to. He just asks questions and evaluates whether Werner can be trusted. Werner's terrified, but also hopeful. If this job happens, if the crew actually pulls it off, his gambling debt disappears. More than disappears. He gets paid. Burke promises 10% of the take. Werner agrees without negotiating. He's not in a position to negotiate. Over the next several weeks, Werner provides information that transforms a vague opportunity into a concrete plan. He explains how the Lufthansa cargo facility operates, how shipments arrive and get processed, how the vault system works, who has keys, when shifts change, where security cameras are positioned, where the blind spots exist. He brings photocopied documents, schedules, floor plans, everything Burke needs to build a strategy. Burke studies this material like he's preparing for a doctoral thesis. He drives to Kennedy Airport multiple times, parks in different locations, watches trucks come and go, times security patrols, identifies patterns. He's looking for the moment of maximum vulnerability, the window when the most cash is present with the least security. Werner tells him it's Monday mornings. Currency shipments arrive Friday or Saturday. They sit in the vault over the weekend because armored trucks don't pick up on weekends. By Monday morning, the vault can hold $5 million or more, just sitting there, waiting. Burke assembles his crew carefully. Not just skill, but psychology. He needs guys who won't panic, who can execute under pressure, who understand that violence is a last resort because violence creates witnesses and witnesses create prosecutions. Tommy DeSimone is obvious. Tommy's a stone-cold killer when necessary, but he can also control himself when the job requires subtlety. Angelo Sepe, Louis Cafra, Joe Manry, Paolo Licastri, Robert McMahon, each selected for specific abilities, each with a history of successful jobs, each desperate enough for money to take the risk. Henry's role is coordination. He's not going inside the facility. That's for younger guys with less to lose. Henry's got a family, a parole officer he reports to monthly, an arrest record that means another conviction sends him away for decades. So he stays in the background, helps with planning, coordinates logistics, makes sure everyone knows their role. He's the executive producer of a criminal production. Burke's the director. The crew are the actors. And the script is being written in real time as more information comes in from Werner. They need vehicles. A van for the crew going inside. Backup cars in case something goes wrong. Stolen plates. Clean vehicles that can't be traced back to anyone connected to the operation. Burke handles this through contacts in the car theft world. Professional boost crews who can deliver specific vehicles on specific dates. The van needs to be unremarkable. The kind you see 1,000 times a day and never remember. A black Ford Econoline. Perfect for blending in at an airport at 3 in the morning. They need weapons. Not to use, but to intimidate. The goal is zero violence. Get in. Control the employees. Open the vault. Load the money. Get out. No shooting unless absolutely necessary. Burke acquires pistols and shotguns through black market dealers who specialize in untraceable firearms. Guns that have had serial numbers removed. Guns that can't be connected to any previous crimes. Each crew member will be armed, but instructed that weapons are for show. For control, not for killing. They need a place to transfer the money after the robbery. The van used in the heist can't be the van used to transport the money afterward. Too risky. Too easily identified. So Burke arranges a warehouse in Queens. Private location. No witnesses. The crew will drive the van there immediately after the heist. Transfer the money to Burke's personal vehicle. Then the van gets disposed of. Crushed in a junkyard owned by mob-connected guys who won't ask questions. Evidence destroyed within hours of the crime. The planning takes months. Burke is meticulous. Obsessive. He war games every scenario. What if security is different than Werner described? What if the vault has more locks than anticipated? What if police happen to be nearby when the crew exits? Every question gets answered with contingency plans, alternative routes, backup strategies. This is why Burke is successful, why he's never been convicted of the dozens of robberies everyone knows he committed. He plans for failure and executes for success. Werner provides one final piece of critical information in late November. A large currency shipment is scheduled to arrive Saturday, December 9th. Over $5 million. Maybe more. It'll sit in the vault all weekend. Monday morning, December 11th, is the perfect window. Minimal security. Maximum cash. Burke listens to this information and makes the decision. They're going. Monday, December 11th, 1978. 3 a.m. This is happening. He gathers the crew at Robert's Lounge. Lays out the plan in detail. Who goes inside? Who drives? Who stays outside as lookout? What everyone does if something goes wrong. The split is predetermined. Burke gets the largest share. He's the architect, the boss. Everyone else gets cuts based on their role. Werner gets his 10% for providing access and information. Krugman gets a finder's fee. The crew members split what's left. If the take is $5 million, everyone walks away with life-changing money. Enough to retire. Enough to disappear if necessary. But Burke emphasizes one non-negotiable rule. Silence. Nobody talks about this job. Not to girlfriends. Not to wives. Not to other crew members who aren't involved. This is need to know, and only 6 people need to know. Loose lips sink ships, and loose lips in this context mean life in federal prison. Everyone nods. Everyone agrees. Everyone understands the stakes. The week before the heist, Henry barely sleeps. He goes through the motions of normal life. Dinner with Karen and the kids. Checking in with his parole officer. Pretending everything is routine. But his mind is racing through the plan. Identifying potential problems. Worrying about variables they can't control. What if Werner panicked and told someone? What if the FBI is already watching? What if this is a setup? Burke remains calm. He's pulled bigger jobs. Taken bigger risks. This is just another operation. Complex, but manageable. Risky, but calculated. The potential reward justifies the danger. And if it goes wrong, if they get caught, that's the game. You know the stakes when you sit down at the table. Nobody's being forced to participate. Everyone's choosing this path. December 10th arrives. The crew does final preparations. The vehicles are ready. The weapons are ready. The vault information is confirmed. Werner calls from a payphone. The shipment arrived on schedule. $5.8 million sitting in the Lufthansa cargo vault. Burke makes the final decision. We're green. Tomorrow morning, 3 a.m. Everyone meet at the designated location by 2:30. No alcohol tonight. No drugs. Get rest. Stay sharp. This is the biggest job any of them will ever pull. Henry goes home. Kisses Karen goodnight. Looks in on his sleeping children. Gina's 10 years old. Greg's 9. They have no idea their father is about to participate in the largest cash robbery in American history. No idea that tomorrow will change everything. That the money from this job will flow through their lives like water. That it will also bring attention that destroys everything. The clock ticks toward 3 a.m. December 11th. Monday morning. Dark. Cold. The moment when everything changes. When a plan months in the making becomes reality. When 6 men walk into a cargo facility at Kennedy Airport and walk out with almost $6 million in cash and jewelry. When Henry Hill and Jimmy Burke and Tommy DeSimone cement their places in criminal history. The planning is over. The execution is about to begin. Chapter 8. The Lufthansa Heist, Execution. 3 o'clock in the morning. December 11th, 1978. Kennedy Airport exists in that dead zone between the last flights of Sunday night and the first departures of Monday morning. The air is frozen. Temperature hovering around 20 degrees. The kind of cold that makes metal brittle and breath visible and every sound sharper in the darkness. Perfect conditions for what's about to happen. The black Ford Econoline van sits in a parking lot half a mile from the Lufthansa cargo facility. 6 men inside wearing ski masks and gloves. Tommy DeSimone behind the wheel. Angelo Sepe riding shotgun. Louis Caffra, Joe Manry, Paolo Licastri, and Robert McMahon in the back. Each man carries a weapon. Each man knows exactly what he's supposed to do. They've rehearsed this. Gone over the plan dozens of times. But rehearsal is theory. This is reality. And reality has variables that can't be controlled. Jimmy Burke, is not in the van. He's 3 miles away at a diner drinking coffee and establishing an alibi. If this goes wrong, if someone gets arrested, Burke needs distance. Plausible deniability. He orchestrated this operation, but his hands stay clean. That's how you survive decades in organized crime. You plan jobs. You coordinate logistics. But you let younger guys take the physical risk. Let them earn their reputation while you protect yours. Henry Hill is not in the van either. He's at Robert's Lounge with Paul Vario. Both of them waiting by the phone, ready to mobilize if something goes wrong, ready to provide bail money if someone gets arrested, ready to disappear if law enforcement comes looking. They're invested in this operation financially and strategically, but their involvement stays in the shadows. The official story, if there ever needs to be one, is that they know nothing about any robbery. At 3:12 a.m., the van pulls out of the parking lot. Headlights off, moving slowly through the industrial sections of the airport where cargo facilities cluster like concrete mushrooms. The Lufthansa building sits at the end of an access road. Building 261, a utilitarian structure designed for function rather than aesthetics. Loading docks, offices, and somewhere inside, a vault containing $5.8 million. Werner's information has been perfect so far. The access gate is exactly where he said it would be, secured with a padlock that's more symbolic than functional. Tommy stops the van 50 feet from the gate. Angelo gets out with bolt cutters, walks to the gate like he belongs there, like he's an employee arriving for an early shift. The bolt cutters slice through the lock in 3 seconds. The chain falls. The gate swings open. Angelo gets back in the van. They're through the first barrier. The van backs up to a loading dock. Tommy kills the engine. For 30 seconds, nobody moves. They're listening, looking for any indication that they've been noticed. Security patrols, police cruisers, anything that suggests this operation is compromised. But there's nothing, just industrial silence and the distant hum of planes taxiing on runways a mile away. The airport is alive, but this section is dead. Exactly as Werner promised. They exit the van. 6 masked men moving with practiced efficiency. Tommy and Angelo head for the main entrance. The others follow in formation. Werner provided a key, a copy he made weeks ago when Burke first approached him. Tommy slides the key into the lock, turns it. The door opens. They're inside. The cargo facility at 3 in the morning operates on a skeleton crew. 5 employees. Night shift workers processing late arrivals and preparing early departures. Nobody expects trouble. Nobody's prepared for what walks through that door. Tommy and Angelo enter first. Weapons drawn, but not pointed. They're controlling the situation through presence rather than violence. The first employee they encounter is a cargo handler. Mid-50s. Probably been working this shift for 20 years. He looks up from his clipboard and freezes. Nobody move. Nobody scream. Nobody be a hero. Tommy's voice is calm, almost gentle. This is a robbery. We're professionals. We're not here to hurt anyone. Do what we say and everyone goes home safe. The cargo handler nods. Hands up, not resisting. Understanding immediately that cooperation is survival. The crew moves through the facility room by room, gathering employees, herding them to the break room like cattle. Each person they encounter responds the same way. Shock, fear, compliance. Nobody reaches for an alarm. Nobody runs, because running means getting shot, and these men look like they'll shoot. The masks hide their faces, but not their competence. This is clearly not their first robbery. Within 8 minutes, all 5 employees are secured in the break room, hands bound with plastic zip ties. Sitting on the floor, one of the crew stays with them. Gun visible. Message clear. Stay quiet. Stay still. This will be over soon. The employees comply because what choice do they have? They're cargo handlers making $12 an hour. Lufthansa doesn't pay them enough to die for company money. The vault is the next challenge. It's a reinforced room with double-locked doors. Werner provided detailed information, but information and reality don't always match. Tommy locates the night shift supervisor, a man named Rudy Eirich, German national, been working for Lufthansa for 15 years. He has access to the vault. He has the keys. But he's also terrified, shaking so badly he can barely stand. Tommy speaks to him directly. Listen carefully. We know you have keys to the vault. We know the combination. We need you to open it. If you cooperate, this ends peacefully. If you resist, people get hurt. Your choice. Eirik nods. He's not a hero. He's a supervisor who wants to see his family again. He fumbles with his keys, drops them, picks them up. His hands are shaking so violently he can barely insert the key into the first lock. Angelo steadies him. Calm down. Take your breath. We have time. Nobody's rushing you. The gentleness is strategic. A panicked employee makes mistakes, triggers alarms accidentally, does something stupid that complicates the situation. Better to keep him calm, keep him functional. Get the vault open and get out. The first lock disengages. Eirik moves to the combination lock. He's trying to remember the sequence. His mind is blank with fear. Tommy presses the gun barrel against his spine. Not hard. Just a reminder. Focus. Remember. Do your job. Eirik closes his eyes. Breathes. Starts turning the dial. Right. Left. Right. The mechanism clicks. The lock disengages. The vault door swings open. What they see inside exceeds expectations. The vault is organized with Germanic precision. Currency wrapped in bank straps, stacked on metal shelves. Boxes of jewelry, watches, diamonds, high-value items being shipped from Europe to American retailers. Werner said, 5 million. The reality looks like more. Significantly more. Tommy estimates 6 million just for visual assessment. Maybe more if the jewelry is worth what it appears to be. They start loading. Canvas bags brought specifically for this purpose. Heavy-duty bags that can hold hundreds of thousands of dollars without tearing. Each man grabs a bag and starts filling. Cash first, then jewelry. Working methodically. No rushing. No grabbing randomly. They're selecting the highest value items. Prioritizing American currency over foreign. Taking only what they can carry efficiently. The loading takes 40 minutes. Longer than planned, but necessary. You don't rush when you're handling $6 million. You take the time to do it right. To maximize the take. The van is parked right outside, just yards away. Each bag gets carried out and loaded carefully. The crew works in rotation. 2 inside filling bags. 2 carrying to the van. 2 watching the employees. Military precision applied to criminal enterprise. At 4:16 a.m., they're done. The vault is stripped of everything valuable. The bags are loaded. The employees are still secured in the break room. Tommy gives them final instructions. We're leaving now. You stay here for 10 minutes. Don't move. Don't call for help. We have people watching. If police show up in the next 10 minutes, we'll know someone talked. And we'll come back. Everyone understands. Everyone nods. The threat is implicit and effective. The crew exits the building. Loads into the van. Tommy starts the engine. They drive out the same way they came in. Through the cut gate. Down the access road. Headlights still off. Moving at exactly the speed limit. Not too fast. Not too slow. Just a van driving through an industrial area in the early morning. Nothing suspicious. Nothing memorable. They reach the main road at 4:23. 64 minutes from entry to exit. Longer than ideal, but successful. No shots fired. No injuries. No police. The perfect robbery. They drive to the warehouse in Queens. The location Burke selected weeks ago. Private. Isolated. No witnesses. Burke is waiting with his personal vehicle. A Cadillac with a trunk large enough to hold the bags. The transfer happens quickly. Bags from the van to the Cadillac. Burke doesn't count. Doesn't inventory. That comes later. Right now, speed matters more than accuracy. Get the money secure. Get the van disposed of. Get everyone dispersed before sunrise. The warehouse door closes. Burke drives away with $6 million in his trunk. The van is supposed to go to a junkyard. Supposed to be crushed within hours. Destroyed. Evidence eliminated. This is where the plan starts to unravel. Parnell Edwards. Stacks. A low-level associate who drove one of the backup vehicles. His job was simple. Take the van to the junkyard in New Jersey. Watch it get crushed. Make sure no evidence survives. Burke gave him explicit instructions. This happens tonight. immediately after the transfer. No delays. No excuses. This is the most important part of the operation. Destroy the evidence. But Stax is high. He's been drinking. He's exhausted from the adrenaline of the operation and the reality of what they just pulled off. Instead of driving to New Jersey, he drives to his girlfriend's apartment in Brooklyn, parks the van on the street, plans to rest for a few hours, and then handle the disposal. It's a small deviation from the plan. A minor delay. What could hurt? The van sits on that Brooklyn street next to a fire hydrant. Illegal parking. The kind of thing cops notice on their morning patrols. At 7:30 a.m., a police officer spots it, runs the plates. They're stolen. He calls it in. Within an hour, the van is impounded. Forensics teams descend. They find fingerprints, footprints, fibers, everything the crew should have cleaned, but didn't because the van was supposed to be crushed. Evidence that will eventually connect law enforcement to Burke's crew. But that's hours away. Right now, the crew is celebrating. They gather at Robert's lounge. Burke opens the bags, starts counting. The take is even bigger than estimated. $5,875,000 in cash. Another $875,000 in jewelry. $6.75 million total. The largest cash robbery in American history. Split among the participants. Even the smallest shares are life-changing amounts. Henry gets his cut. $250,000. More money than he's ever seen. More than he imagined possible from a single job. He holds it and feels invincible. This is it. This is the score that sets him up forever. He can pay off debts, invest in legitimate businesses, create a buffer between his family and the street. This changes everything. Burke is already thinking differently. His cut is over $2 million, but he's also thinking about the other cuts. Money that's going to guys who might talk, might spend recklessly, might draw attention. Warner wants his 10%, $600,000. Krugman wants his finder's fee, $500,000. The crew members each want their shares. Burke does the math and realizes something. The split is expensive and unnecessary because dead men don't collect debts. Dead men don't spend money in ways that attract attention. Dead men don't testify when the FBI starts investigating. The Lufthansa heist is perfect, but the aftermath could destroy everything. Unless Burke manages it properly. Unless he makes decisions that prioritize long-term security over short-term loyalty. 72 hours after the robbery, the FBI announces the Lufthansa investigation. $6.75 million stolen. The largest cash theft in American history. Every federal agent in New York is assigned to the case. The pressure is enormous. Immediate. Existential. And Jimmy Burke, sitting in his bar, counting money that could send him to prison for life, makes a decision that will define the next year. Nobody who participated in this heist can be allowed to become a liability. The crew needs to be managed. Permanently. The Lufthansa murders are about to begin. Chapter 9. The Lufthansa Murders. The van sits in a police impound lot in Brooklyn. Evidence technicians photograph every inch. Dust for fingerprints. Collect fiber samples. Vacuum the interior for trace evidence. What they find is a roadmap straight to Jimmy Burke's crew. Fingerprints belonging to Parnell Edwards. Hair fibers that will eventually match DNA profiles. Shoe impressions in the carpet. Every piece of evidence that should have been destroyed when the van got crushed. All preserved because one man got high and lazy and decided a few hours of sleep mattered more than following orders. Burke finds out about the van on December 13th, 2 days after the heist. A cop on his payroll makes a phone call. Jimmy, we got a problem. The van from the airport job? It's an hour impound. Forensics is all over it. Burke doesn't yell, doesn't panic. He just asks one question. Who's Prince? The answer comes back within hours. Stax Edwards, the driver who was supposed to dispose of the evidence. The weak link who just became a death sentence for everyone involved. Burke makes a call. Tommy DeSimone answers. They speak in code, but the message is clear. The problem needs to be handled. Tonight. Tommy understands. This isn't about punishment. This is about survival. Edwards made a mistake that threatens the entire operation. In the world Burke operates in, mistakes like that get corrected permanently. No second chances. No warnings. Just elimination. December 18th. 1 week after the heist. Tommy and Angelo Seppe drive to Edward's apartment in Queens. It's early evening. Cold. Dark by 5:30. They knock on the door. Edwards opens it expecting maybe a girlfriend or a friend from the neighborhood. Instead, he sees Tommy holding a pistol with a silencer attached. The recognition in Edwards' eyes lasts maybe 2 seconds. Then Tommy fires. 6 shots. Center mass. Edwards drops in his own doorway. Blood pooling on the linoleum floor of a $600 a month apartment. The first casualty of the Lufthansa heist. Dead because he was tired and high and stupid. Tommy and Angelo leave the body where it falls. No attempt to hide it. No effort to make it look like anything other than what it is. An execution. A message. This is what happens when you deviate from the plan. When you create problems. When you become a liability. The message isn't for Edwards. He's past receiving messages. It's for everyone else involved in the heist. Follow the rules. Stay quiet. Or end up like Stacks. The murder makes the newspapers. Police find Edwards' body the next morning when neighbors complain about the door being open. Detectives work the scene, but they're not stupid. They know what this is. Organized crime cleanup. Someone got killed for screwing up. They start making connections. Edwards has arrests going back years. Associates include known members of the Lucchese family. He was seen at Robert's Lounge regularly. The dots connect to Burke's crew. But connecting dots and proving murder are different things. Without witnesses or physical evidence linking Burke or Tommy to the scene, the case stalls. Henry hears about Edwards' death the same day everyone else does. Word travels fast in that world. He's at home when the phone rings. A brief conversation in code. The problem got handled. Henry understands what that means. He hangs up and feels something he hasn't felt since he was a kid. Fear. Real fear. Because Edwards wasn't killed for talking to police. He was killed for making a mistake. For being careless. And if Burke is willing to kill for carelessness, how far will he go to protect $6 million? The paranoia starts immediately. Burke becomes convinced that everyone who participated in the heist is a potential informant. Every conversation could be recorded. Every phone call could be tapped. He stops meeting people in public. Stops using phones entirely. All communication happens face to face in locations that change daily. He's watching everyone, evaluating loyalty, calculating risk. And the calculation is simple. The fewer people who know about Lufthansa, the safer he is. Martin Krugman is next. The bookmaker who brought the job to Burke's attention. Krugman's been asking for his finder's fee, $500,000. Burke promised it. But paying Krugman means acknowledging the connection between Burke and the heist. It creates a paper trail, a transaction that could be traced. And Krugman's got a big mouth. He's been celebrating, buying drinks, acting like a man who just came into money. People notice. People talk. And talk is deadly. Burke invites Krugman to a meeting. January 6th, 1979. Less than a month after the heist. They're supposed to discuss the payment. Krugman arrives expecting a bag of cash. Instead, he disappears. No body is ever found. No crime scene. No evidence. Just a man who existed on January 5th and stopped existing on January 6th. His wife files a missing persons report. Police investigate, but there's nothing to investigate. No witnesses. No physical evidence. Just the statistical reality that people connected to major robberies tend to disappear. Henry knows what happened. Everyone knows. Krugman asked for his money, and Burke decided the money was more valuable than Krugman's life. It's pure mathematics. 6.75 million divided by fewer people equals larger shares for those who remain. And the dead don't spend. Don't talk. Don't create problems. Burke is consolidating, eliminating liabilities, protecting the score by erasing everyone connected to it. The FBI knows about the murders too. They're building a case, but it's circumstantial. Everyone who dies or disappears has connections to organized crime. Everyone was seen around Robert's Lounge in the weeks after the Lufthansa heist. But that's not evidence of murder. That's pattern recognition. To make arrests, they need witnesses, informants, Someone willing to testify that Burke ordered the killings. And nobody's willing. Because being willing means being dead. Tommy DeSimone is doing most of the killing. He's Burke's enforcer. The guy who handles problems without asking questions or expressing remorse. Tommy's killed before. Lots of times. He's got a reputation as someone who enjoys it. Who gets off on the power of taking life. Burke uses this. Directs it. Tommy becomes the weapon Burke points at anyone who threatens the operation. Louis Caffer disappears in March. Joe Manry in April. Both were crew members on the heist. Both were getting nervous. Talking about maybe leaving New York. Maybe taking their shares and starting over somewhere the FBI isn't watching. Burke hears about this through informants he's placed within the crew. Guys report to him about who's saying what. Who's acting scared. Who might flip under pressure. Caffer and Manry get invited to meetings they never return from. Their bodies are never recovered. Just 2 more names added to the list of Lufthansa-connected disappearances. By summer of 1979, 8 people connected to the heist are dead or missing. The FBI knows Burke is responsible. They just can't prove it. They surveil Robert's lounge 24 hours a day. Follow Burke everywhere he goes. Tap every phone he might use. Interview anyone who's ever known him. The pressure is enormous. Constant. But Burke doesn't crack. Doesn't change his routine. Doesn't show fear or guilt or concern. He goes about his business like a man with nothing to hide. Henry's survival instincts are screaming. He's still alive because he's valuable to Burke and Vario. He's a good earner. He's got operations running that generate steady income. And he hasn't done anything that makes him a liability. He doesn't talk about Lufthansa. Doesn't spend his share conspicuously. Doesn't act like someone who recently came into $250,000. He's careful, methodical, trying to stay below the radar that's getting everyone else killed. But being careful isn't enough. Because Tommy DeSimone makes a fatal mistake. In 1978, before the Lufthansa heist, Tommy killed a made man, William Bentvena, Billy Batts, a soldier in the Gambino family. The murder happened in a moment of anger. Tommy and Billy got into an argument at a bar. Billy insulted Tommy, questioned his toughness, his manhood. Tommy responded the only way he knows how, with violence. He beat Billy to death with Burke and Henry helping dispose of the body. Killing a made man is the ultimate violation in organized crime. You can kill associates, kill civilians, kill anyone who isn't officially inducted into a family. But made men are protected. Killing one without permission from the administration means you die. It's not negotiable, not forgivable. The only reason Tommy survived this long is that the Gambino family didn't know who killed Billy Batts. They suspected. They investigated. But they couldn't prove it. Until someone talks. Until an informant provides information linking Tommy to the murder. The Gambino family demands justice. They approach the Lucchese family administration. Paul Vario's bosses, the commission that governs all 5 families in New York. The request is simple. Hand over Tommy DeSimone. Let's handle this. The Lucchese family agrees. Because protecting Tommy means going to war with the Gambinos. And war is expensive, bloody, bad for business. Vario gets the order in late 1979. Give up Tommy. Let the Gambinos have him. Vario's known Tommy for years. Watch him grow up. Used him for countless jobs. But business is business. Orders are orders. You don't defy the commission. You don't protect someone who killed a made man without authorization. Tommy has to go. They make it look like a promotion. Tommy's getting made. Finally becoming a full member of the Lucchese family. It's what he's wanted his entire life. The ceremony. The blood oath. The official induction into Cosa Nostra. Tommy's thrilled. He's been waiting for this moment for years. His Sicilian heritage finally paying off. His decades of work and loyalty and violence finally being rewarded. January 14th, 1980. Tommy gets dressed in his best suit. He's going to the ceremony location, a house in Queens where inductions traditionally happen. He's nervous but excited. This is the culmination of everything he's worked for. He arrives at the house, walks inside expecting to see made men gathered for the ritual. Instead, he sees guns, and he understands in that final moment what's really happening. He's not being made. He's being murdered. They shoot Tommy in the back of the head. Execution style. His body is never found, never recovered, just erased like he never existed. The Gambino family gets their justice. The Lucchese family maintains peace. And Jimmy Burke loses his primary enforcer. The man who handled all the Lufthansa murders. The man who knew everything about Burke's operations. Gone. Henry finds out about Tommy's death through the grapevine. Nobody admits what happened officially. Tommy just disappears. But everyone understands. Made men don't just vanish without explanation. Tommy got killed for the Billy Bats murder. And his death sends a clear message. Nobody's untouchable. Not even the guys doing the killing. Everyone's expendable when the circumstances demand it. The Lufthansa investigation continues through 1979 into 1980. The FBI has connected 12 murders to the heist. 12 people who knew something or participated somehow. All dead or missing. The only major figure still alive is Louis Werner, the cargo supervisor who provided the inside information. Werner's the weak link. The civilian caught up in something way beyond his understanding. The FBI focuses on him because he's the most likely to break. They arrest Werner in early 1979. Charge him with conspiracy. Armed robbery. He faces 40 years if convicted. His lawyer negotiates, but Werner won't cooperate. Won't name Burke or anyone else. Because he knows what cooperation means. It means his family gets killed. His wife. His kids. Everyone he cares about becomes a target. So he stays silent. Takes his chances at trial. Gets convicted in January 1980. Sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Werner goes to prison. Burke stays free. The FBI has theories and surveillance and circumstantial evidence. But they don't have witnesses. Don't have physical evidence linking Burke to the robbery or the murders. The case stalls. The investigation continues, but momentum is lost. The largest cash robbery in American history remains technically unsolved. Burke sits in Robert's lounge counting money and breathing easier. But the paranoia never stops. Burke continues watching everyone. Continues eliminating people he considers risks. The body count rises. 19 people connected to Lufthansa dead or missing by the end of 1980. An entire crew decimated. Erased. Sacrificed to protect one man's freedom and fortune. Henry watches this massacre from the margins. He's still earning. Still working. Still playing the role of loyal associate. But he's also using drugs now. Cocaine. Lots of cocaine. The stress of watching friends get murdered. The paranoia of wondering if he's next. The weight of knowing too much. It's crushing him. The drugs help. They make everything feel manageable. Make the fear recede in a background noise. But they also make him sloppy. Careless. Exactly the kind of liability that gets people killed. And Henry Hill is about to become the biggest liability of all. Chapter 10. Playing for the mob. While Jimmy Burke is systematically eliminating everyone connected to the Lufthansa heist, Henry Hill is running a completely separate criminal operation that will ultimately prove just as dangerous. Boston College basketball. Point shaving. A gambling scheme so audacious and so poorly conceived that it guarantees attention from law enforcement. And Henry's right in the middle of it. The scheme starts in prison. Back when Henry was serving his sentence in the mid-1970s. That's where he met Paul Motzi, a drug dealer and gambler doing time for extortion. They became friends the way inmates do. Shared meals. Traded stories. Made connections that would prove valuable on the outside. Motzi got released first. Stayed in touch. And in 1978, he approached Henry with an opportunity. Motzi knows two brothers. Rocco and Tony Perla. Small-time gamblers from Pittsburgh with big ambitions and limited resources. They've got a connection at Boston College. Rick Kuhn, a senior forward on the basketball team. Kuhn's a friend from high school. A mediocre player who sees limited minutes, but who's desperate for money. Gambling debts. The usual story. The Perla brothers think Kuhn can be convinced to influence game outcomes. Not throw games entirely. Just shave points. Make sure Boston College wins or loses by margins that allow connected gamblers to beat the spread. Motzi brings this proposal to Henry in October 1978, right before the Lufthansa planning goes into high gear. Henry's intrigued but cautious. Point shaving isn't new. College basketball has been corrupted since the 1950s. But it's also extremely risky. The NCAA watches betting patterns. Casinos flag unusual activity. One wrong move, and federal investigators start asking questions. But the potential profit is enormous. If you know the outcome before it happens, you could bet accordingly and win consistently. Turn 10,000 into 50,000 over a season. Henry takes the idea to Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario. This is how the hierarchy works. You don't launch operations without approval from above. Burke likes it. He's always looking for ways to beat bookmakers. And basketball is perfect. Fast-paced. High-scoring. Lots of variables that make point shaving difficult to detect. Vario gives his blessing. This is a side project. Something to generate income while the Lufthansa job is being planned. Henry gets authorization to proceed. November 16th, 1978. Henry flies to Boston. Meets with Motzi, the Perla brothers, and Rick Kuhn at a hotel near campus. The meeting is awkward. Henry's a career criminal. Kuhn's a 21-year-old college athlete who's never done anything more illegal than smoking marijuana. They're from different worlds. But money bridges that gap. Henry lays out the proposal simply. You control the point spread. We tell you which games. You make sure Boston College performs accordingly. You get paid $2,500 per game. Plus, we'll bet your share if you want to double your money. Kuhn agrees immediately. He's in over his head with gambling debts. $2,500 per game over a season could clear everything and leave him with profit. He doesn't think about the consequences. Doesn't consider what happens if they get caught. He just sees money. Sees a solution to his immediate problems. It's the same calculation desperate people make when they borrow from loan sharks or agree to hijack trucks. Short-term relief in exchange for long-term catastrophe. But Kuhn's not enough. He's not a star player. He doesn't control the outcome of games through his individual performance. They need more players. Kuhn recruits Jim Sweeney, the team's point guard, a junior who's getting significant playing time and has actual influence over game tempo and scoring. Sweeney's hesitant, but Kuhn convinces him. It's just point shaving. They're not throwing games. Not tanking their season. Just making sure the margins fall within certain ranges. It sounds almost reasonable when Kuhn explains it. They also approach Ernie Cobb, Boston College's leading scorer. Cobb's participation would give them nearly complete control over outcomes. But Cobb's smart enough to be suspicious. He listens to the pitch, but doesn't commit. Later, he'll claim he refused entirely. The gamblers will claim he accepted money and participated. The truth exists somewhere in that gray area where deniability meets complicity. The first test game happens December 6th, 1978. Boston College versus Providence. The Eagles are favored by 6 to 7 points. The plan is for Kuhn and Sweeney to keep the game close. Make sure Boston College doesn't cover the spread. Burke and Henry bet heavily on Providence to cover or win outright. Except the plan fails spectacularly. Boston College establishes an early lead and wins by 19 points. The gamblers lose thousands of dollars. Burke is furious. Henry calls an emergency meeting with the players. What happened? Kuhn and Sweeney explain that they tried but couldn't control the game. Other players were performing too well. The coach made substitutions they didn't anticipate. It's harder than everyone thought to deliberately underperform without being obvious. Burke wants to abandon the scheme entirely, but Henry convinces him to try again. They need more control, more players, better coordination. The second attempt is December 16th against Harvard. Boston College is favored by 12 to 13 points. This time the players execute better. They miss shots intentionally, turn the ball over at crucial moments, play defense that's just mediocre enough to let Harvard score. The final margin is 3 points, 86 to 83. Burke and Henry win their bets. The players get paid. The scheme works exactly as designed. Over the next 2 months, they target 9 games total. Holy Cross twice, University of Connecticut, UCLA, Fordham, Rhode Island, St. John's. The pattern is always the same. Henry gets the betting line, tells the players what margin they need to hit. The players perform accordingly. The gamblers bet and win. Money flows from bookmakers to Burke's crew to the players. It's a machine that generates profit through corruption. But machines break. And this one breaks catastrophically during the second Holy Cross game. February 10th, 1979. Holy Cross is favored to win by 7 points. The scheme is to let Holy Cross win by more than the spread. Burke bets $50,000 on Holy Cross to cover. Except the game doesn't go as planned. Boston College plays better than expected. Ernie Cobb, who may or may not be participating, scores 8 points in the final minute. Brings the game close. Holy Cross wins by only 2 points. Burke loses $50,000. Henry's at Burke's house watching the game on television. When Cobb scores those final points and ruins the bet, Burke goes ballistic. He kicks his television screen, shatters it, screams about flying to Boston and breaking every bone in Kuhn's body. Henry talks him down, but the damage is done. Burke declares he's finished with college basketball. The scheme ends on a loss. A failure. The worst possible outcome. What nobody realizes at the time is that the FBI has been noticing unusual betting patterns. Casinos in Las Vegas flagged several Boston College games for abnormal wagering activity. Large sums being placed on specific outcomes by bettors with known mob connections. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. Too profitable to be luck. Federal investigators start building a file, collecting data, interviewing bookmakers. The investigation is quiet, methodical, building evidence without alerting targets. Henry doesn't know any of this. He's too busy dealing with Lufthansa fallout and his growing cocaine habit. The basketball scheme becomes a footnote, a side hustle that didn't work out as planned. He made some money, lost some money, moved on to other operations. It's ancient history by 1980, something that happened a year ago that nobody's talking about anymore. Except people are talking. Rick Kuhn's talking, not to authorities, to other students, to friends, bragging about how he made money point shaving, how he worked with mobsters, how he was part of something bigger than college basketball. It's stupid, reckless, the kind of talk that gets people arrested. But Kuhn's 22 years old and hasn't learned that silence is survival. He thinks the scheme is over so the risk is gone. He's wrong. Jim Sweeney's talking too, telling his girlfriend, his roommate, confiding in people he trusts about the pressure he felt, the moral compromise he made. He's not bragging. He's confessing, seeking absolution from friends who can't provide it. But every person he tells is another potential witness, another link in a chain that leads back to Henry Hill and Jimmy Burke. The NCAA investigates quietly throughout 1979. They interview players, examine game footage, compare betting patterns to performance statistics. They're building a case, but they don't have jurisdiction for criminal prosecution. That requires federal involvement. That requires the FBI. And the FBI is already investigating Burke's crew for Lufthansa. When they discover the Boston College connection, it becomes another thread to pull, another way to build a conspiracy case against the entire organization. Henry's drug use escalates dramatically during this period. What started as recreational cocaine becomes a daily necessity. He's snorting lines before breakfast, during lunch, late into the night. The drug makes him feel invincible, even as his world is collapsing around him. He's watching friends get murdered, watching the FBI close in, watching his marriage deteriorate as Karen realizes something's seriously wrong. But the cocaine makes all of it manageable, makes fear feel distant, makes paranoia feel like clarity. Paul Vario notices. Burke notices. Henry's becoming unreliable, missing meetings, showing up high to conversations that require sobriety, making mistakes that attract attention. He's violating the cardinal rule Vario established decades ago. No drugs, especially no dealing drugs. But Henry's not just using. He's dealing, building his own cocaine operation on the side, importing from Pittsburgh, distributing in New York, making money that doesn't go through official channels, money that Vario doesn't get a piece of. This is more than a violation. It's betrayal. Henry's supposed to be loyal, supposed to run everything through proper channels, supposed to kick up his percentage to Vario like every other associate. Instead, he's freelancing, operating independently, creating exposure that threatens everyone. And in the paranoid aftermath of Lufthansa, exposure equals death. Vario confronts Henry in mid-1979, tells him to stop dealing drugs immediately, reminds him what happened to everyone else who became liabilities. Henry promises to stop, swears he'll get clean, swears he'll focus on legitimate crew business. Then he goes right back to dealing. Because he can't stop. The money's too good. The drugs are too necessary. He's trapped in a cycle that accelerates toward disaster. Tommy DeSimone's murder in January 1980 sends a clear message. Nobody's protected. Not even guys who've killed for the family. Not even Burke's primary enforcer. If Tommy can be eliminated for past mistakes, anyone can. Henry understands this intellectually, but the cocaine keeps him from processing it emotionally. He's living in a state of chemically induced denial, convinced he's too valuable to kill, too smart to get caught, too connected to be abandoned. He's wrong on all counts. By April 1980, Henry's running a full-scale cocaine operation. He's got partners in Pittsburgh providing supply. He's got distributors in New York moving product. He's making more money from drugs than he ever made from hijacking or loan sharking. But he's also drawing attention. The DEA is watching him. Local narcotics units are watching him. And most dangerous of all, Paul Vario is watching him, calculating whether Henry Hill has become more liability than asset. The FBI knows about the drug operation. They've been building a case for months. Surveillance, wiretaps, informants reporting on Henry's activities. They're waiting for the right moment to move. Waiting until they have enough evidence to guarantee conviction. Waiting until they can leverage an arrest into cooperation. Because Henry Hill knows everything. Knows about Lufthansa. Knows about the murders. Knows about the Boston College scheme. Knows about decades of Lucchese family operations. If they can flip Henry Hill, they can dismantle the entire organization. May 11th, 1980. Henry wakes up at 6 in the morning in his Long Island home. Karen's in the kitchen making breakfast. The kids are getting ready for school. It's a normal Sunday morning. Except Henry notices a helicopter circling low over the neighborhood. Too low for normal traffic. He goes to the window and sees cars. Unmarked sedans parked on a street. Men in suits standing on corners. His paranoia spikes. Something's wrong. Something's happening. At 6:45 a.m., someone knocks on the door. Hard. Authoritative. Henry looks through the peephole and sees badges. Federal agents. DEA. FBI. Local police. An army of law enforcement. He considers running. But where? They've got the house surrounded. The helicopter overhead. He's trapped. This is the moment he's been dreading and denying for months. The moment when everything collapses. He opens the door. They rush in with guns drawn. Hands up. Get on the ground. Face down. Henry complies. Karen's screaming. The kids are crying. Agents tear through the house, searching for drugs and evidence. They find cocaine. They find cash. They find documents connecting Henry to his distribution network. Everything they need to prosecute. They arrest him, read him his rights, put him in handcuffs, and walk him out his front door in full view of his neighbors. The suburban dad who worked construction. The family man with the nice car and the well-maintained lawn. Being led to a police car in handcuffs while his wife sobs and his children watch in confusion. Henry Hill's life, as he knows it, is over. The choice that's coming will define everything. Cooperate and live. Stay silent and die. Because Jimmy Burke is eliminating liabilities. And Henry Hill just became the biggest Chapter 11. The Drug Empire and the Downfall. The arrest changes nothing and everything simultaneously. Henry sits in a federal holding cell, and the reality crystallizes with brutal clarity. He's facing 25 years. Maybe more with his prior record. His parole from the earlier extortion conviction is about to be revoked. The drug charges alone carry mandatory minimums that will keep him behind bars until he's in his 60s. His children will be adults. His marriage will be over. His life will be gone. But that's assuming he even makes it a trial. Because Jimmy Burke is going to kill him. Not for getting arrested. Arrests happen. That's the cost of doing business. Burke will kill him because Henry knows too much and his drug addiction makes him unreliable. Makes him exactly the type of person who cuts deals with prosecutors. Who trades information for reduced sentences. Who becomes a cooperating witness. And in Burke's world, Cooperating witnesses don't make it to trial. They disappear. They have accidents. They commit suicide by shooting themselves twice in the back of the head. Henry's been watching this pattern for 2 years. Since Lufthansa, 19 people murdered or missing. Everyone who knew anything about the heist systematically eliminated. Edwards, Krugman, Caffra, Manry. The entire crew erased. Tommy DeSimone executed for a completely different murder, just to tie up loose ends. Burke is meticulous about eliminating threats. And Henry Hill, sitting in federal custody on drug charges with decades of incriminating knowledge, represents the ultimate threat. The first call Henry makes from jail is to his lawyer. Not to discuss defense strategy, to discuss survival. The lawyer's realistic. You're looking at serious time. Your priors work against you. The evidence is overwhelming. They caught you with product and cash and transaction records. This isn't a case you beat at trial. This is a case you mitigate through cooperation. Henry hangs up, makes another call, this one to Robert's Lounge. He needs to talk to Burke. He needs to gauge whether the crew is going to support him through this or cut him loose. The message comes back within hours. Burke will post bail. Burke will pay for lawyers. Burke will take care of Henry's family while he's fighting the charges. It sounds reassuring. It sounds like loyalty. But Henry's been around long enough to read subtext. Burke's providing support because it keeps Henry close, keeps him controlled. The moment Henry's out on bail, he becomes accessible. And accessible means vulnerable to accidents that look like anything but murder. May 13th, 1980. Henry makes bail. $200,000 posted by associates fronting money for Burke and Vario. Henry walks out of federal custody into a world that feels completely different than the one he left 2 days ago. He's being watched. FBI surveillance is constant. Agents follow him everywhere. Photograph everyone he meets. Document every location he visits. They're building a conspiracy case, collecting evidence for when Henry inevitably flips. Because they know he's going to flip. It's just a matter of time and pressure. But the FBI isn't Henry's biggest problem. Burke is. Henry goes directly to Robert's Lounge after his release. Walks in expecting a welcome, expecting solidarity. Instead, he finds suspicion. Burke's there. Tommy's gone, executed months ago. The crew that remains looks at Henry differently, like he's already compromised, already cooperating. The paranoia that defined the Lufthansa aftermath has intensified. Everyone's a potential rat. Everyone's under suspicion. And Henry's drug arrest makes him the primary suspect. Burke takes Henry aside. Private conversation in the back office. Tells him the drug thing is a problem. A serious problem. Vario's furious. The family bosses are asking questions about who Henry might give up to save himself. Burke says it casually, but the threat is implicit. Henry needs to stand up. Take the charges. Do the time. Prove he's loyal. If he cooperates with the FBI, there will be consequences. Not just for him. For Karen. For Gina and Greg. For everyone he cares about. Henry nods. Agrees. Swears loyalty. Then he leaves and goes straight home and does a line of cocaine because that's the only way he can process the terror. He's trapped between two forces. The federal government promising decades in prison. And Jimmy Burke promising death. There's no good option. No path that leads to safety. He can go to prison and hope Burke doesn't have him killed inside. Or he can cooperate and hope the FBI can protect him from Burke's reach. Both options end badly. The drug operation continues even after the arrest. This is the insanity of addiction. Henry knows he's being watched by the FBI. Knows Burke is waiting for an excuse to kill him. But he can't stop dealing. The money's necessary to pay lawyers and support his family. The drugs are necessary to function. So he keeps moving cocaine through his network, keeps collecting cash, keeps building evidence against himself that prosecutors will eventually use. Karen's terrified. She's lived in denial for years about what Henry really does. The truth was easy to ignore when money was coming in and life was comfortable. But denial doesn't work when FBI agents raid your house at dawn. When your husband gets arrested for cocaine trafficking. When you realize the construction business was always a lie and your entire life is built on organized crime. She's got 2 kids to protect. A home that might get seized. a future that looks catastrophic from every angle. She begs Henry to get out, to take a deal, to cooperate with the FBI and enter witness protection, start over somewhere new with new identities. But Henry can't imagine that life. Can't imagine being a civilian, working a regular job for regular money, living in some small town in the middle of nowhere where nobody knows his name. His entire identity is wrapped up in being connected, being a wise guy, being someone who matters in that world. Cooperating means giving up who he is, becoming nothing. May turns to June. June to July. Henry's drug case moves through the legal system. Discovery, motions, preliminary hearings. His lawyer keeps telling him the same thing. You're going to lose at trial. The evidence is overwhelming. You need to consider cooperation. The government's offering a deal. Testify against Burke and Vario. Provide information about Lufthansa and the murders. In exchange, reduce sentence and witness protection. Henry still resists, but the pressure is mounting from all directions. His lawyer, his wife, his own survival instincts. And then something happens that makes the decision for him. Henry gets word through the grapevine that Burke's planning to have him killed. Not might, not maybe, definitely. Burke's already selected someone for the job. Angelo Sepe, the same guy who helped murder Stax Edwards and Martin Krugman. The plan is simple. Invite Henry to a meeting. Shoot him. Dump the body somewhere it won't be found for weeks. Blame it on rival dealers or Colombian suppliers. Make it look like drug world violence that has nothing to do with Lufthansa. Henry doesn't know if the information is real or FBI disinformation designed to make him cooperate. But he can't take the chance. Because if it's real, if Burke has actually ordered his execution, then staying silent means dying. And Henry Hill doesn't want to die. He's 37 years old. He's got kids. He's got years he wants to live. Loyalty is important, but survival is more important. August 1980. Henry contacts the FBI, not through his lawyer, through a direct call to the field office. He says he wants to talk. He says he has information, major information, about Lufthansa, about murders, about decades of Lucchese family operations. He's ready to cooperate, ready to testify, ready to destroy everyone he's ever worked with if it means staying alive. The FBI moves fast. They pull Henry in for debriefing. Separate location, secure facility, teams of agents with recording equipment and legal pads. They start with basic questions, confirming things they already know, testing whether Henry's credible, whether his information matches their intelligence. Henry passes every test. He knows details that only someone deeply embedded would know. Dates, locations, names, dollar amounts, the internal structure of Vario's crew, who reports to whom, how money flows up the organization. Then they get to Lufthansa. Henry tells them everything, how the job was planned, who participated, how much was stolen, what happened to the money. Most importantly, he tells them about the murders. 19 people killed on Burke's orders. Henry didn't participate directly in the killings. He wasn't a shooter, but he knew about them, heard Burke discuss them, helped dispose of evidence in some cases. He's an accessory to multiple homicides, and he's willing to testify about all of it. The FBI realizes they've got their case. Everything they've been building for 2 years suddenly has a cooperating witness who can tie it together. Burke, Vario, dozens of associates, extortion, loan sharking, hijacking, murder. Henry's testimony can dismantle the entire Lucchese crew operating out of Brooklyn and Queens. It's the biggest organized crime prosecution potential in years. But there's a problem. The statute of limitations on the Lufthansa robbery itself is running out. They can't prosecute Burke for the heist directly because too much time has passed without charges. They can prosecute for the murders, but that's harder. No bodies. No physical evidence. Just Henry's testimony about conversations he heard. Defense attorneys will shred that. Call it hearsay. Impeach Henry's credibility by pointing to his drug use and criminal history. The prosecutors need more. They need other witnesses. They need physical evidence. They need to build cases that don't rely entirely on Henry Hill's word. So they start interviewing everyone connected to Vario's crew, offering deals, promising leniency in exchange for testimony. Some people cooperate. Most refuse. Because cooperating means testifying against Jim, and testifying against Burke means signing your own death warrant. The Boston College point-shaving scandal resurfaces during this period. The FBI's been investigating quietly for over a year. Rick Kuhn's been talking. Jim Sweeney's been talking. Bookmakers in Pittsburgh and New York have been cooperating. The case is nearly complete, but they need evidence linking Burke and Hill directly to the scheme. Henry provides that evidence. He admits his role, describes meetings with the players, explains how the betting worked, confirms that Burke funded the operation. Federal prosecutors decide to pursue the point-shaving case first. It's cleaner than Lufthansa. They've got witnesses. They've got betting records. They've got player testimony. Rick Kuhn will be charged. Burke will be charged. Henry will testify. It's a lower-stakes trial than murder, but it establishes Henry as a credible witness, proves he's willing to testify against former associates, sets the precedent for larger prosecutions to come. September 1980. Karen Hill finally understands the full scope of what's happening. Henry sits her down and explains. He's cooperating with the FBI. He's going to testify against everyone. Burke, Vario, dozens of others. In exchange, they're entering witness protection. New names, new city, new lives. Everything they've known for 15 years of marriage is ending. Karen's reaction isn't relief. It's horror. Because witness protection means leaving everything behind. Her mother, her siblings, her friends, her entire life. They can never contact anyone from their past. Never visit New York. Never be Karen and Henry Hill again. The children don't understand. Gina's 12. Greg's 11. They're told they're moving. Starting over. They can't tell their friends. Can't say goodbye to their grandparents. Can't take anything that might identify them. It's witness protection protocol. Complete severance from previous life. For the kids, it's incomprehensible trauma. Their father's a criminal informant, and their childhood is being erased. October 1980. Henry enters the federal witness protection program officially. The Hill family ceases to exist. New identities get created. Social security numbers, birth certificates, driver's licenses, an entire paper trail for people who didn't exist 6 months ago. They're relocated to an undisclosed city in the Midwest, given a stipend to establish a new life. Henry's required to testify in upcoming trials, but otherwise he's supposed to disappear, become a civilian, live quietly. But Henry Hill has never lived quietly, and even witness protection can't change who he fundamentally is. A criminal, an addict, a man whose entire identity is wrapped up in being a wise guy. You can give him a new name and a new city, but you can't give him a new personality. And that's the fundamental problem with Henry Hill in witness protection. He's incapable of being the person the program requires him to be. The testimony begins in 1981. Henry takes the stand against Rick Kuhn and the others involved in the Boston College scheme. He describes the operation in detail, identifies Burke as the financier, explains how betting worked. His testimony is devastating. Kuhn gets convicted, sentenced to 10 years. Burke gets convicted on racketeering charges, sentenced to 12 years. It's not murder. It's not Lufthansa, but it's prison time. Real prison time that puts Burke away and establishes Henry's credibility as a government witness. More trials follow. Paul Vario gets indicted on extortion charges based on Henry's testimony. Other associates face charges. The prosecutions continue through 1981 and 82. Each trial puts someone away. Each conviction proves Henry's information is accurate. The FBI is systematically dismantling the Lucchese crew that operated out of Brooklyn for decades. And Henry Hill is the key witness making it all possible. But he's also making himself the most hated man in organized crime. A rat, an informant, someone who violated omerta. The mob has a price on his head. Over $1 million to anyone who can find him and kill him. Contract killers across the country are looking for Henry Hill. and he's supposed to trust that witness protection can keep him safe, that his new identity will protect him, that Jimmy Burke's reach doesn't extend beyond prison walls. Henry Hill destroyed the only world he ever belonged to, and now he has to live in a world where he... Chapter 12, The Informant. The transformation happens overnight. Henry Hill goes from being a connected guy who commanded respect on the streets to being the most despised man in organized crime. A rat, a canary, a stool pigeon. Every derogatory term that exists in the criminal lexicon now applies to him. The code he lived by for 25 years has been shattered. Omerta, the vow of silence, the one rule that matters more than any other. Henry broke it, and the consequences extend far beyond his own survival. October 1980. The Hill family sits in a federal safe house while prosecutors prepare for the first round of testimony. Henry's been debriefed for weeks. Agents recording every detail he can remember. Names, dates, crimes. The organizational structure of the Lucchese family. Who reports to whom? How money flows. Where bodies are buried. Literally. Henry knows where several victims of Burke's purge are buried. Remote locations in Queens and Long Island. Industrial sites. Construction projects. Places where concrete got poured over human remains. The FBI excavates based on Henry's information. They find remains. Not all of them. Some bodies were disposed of too well, dissolved in acid or cut up and scattered. But they find enough to corroborate Henry's testimony, to prove he's not fabricating information. The physical evidence matches what he's telling them. This is crucial for prosecution. Defense attorneys will attack Henry's credibility relentlessly. Drug addict, career criminal, man who'll say anything to save himself. But you can't fake bodies. Can't fake forensic evidence. The remains prove Henry's telling the truth. Paul Vario gets indicted first. November 1980. Federal prosecutors charge him with extortion based on Henry's testimony about loan sharking operations. The indictment details how Vario ran his criminal enterprise for decades, how he used violence and intimidation to collect debts, how he corrupted unions and legitimate businesses. It's all there. And the primary witness is Henry Hill, Vario's surrogate son, the kid he brought up from the cab stand, the associate he trusted for 25 years. When Vario hears about Henry's cooperation, his reaction is reported to be calm, almost resigned, because Vario's been in this life long enough to know how it ends. Someone always talks eventually. The FBI grinds people down, offers deals they can't refuse, threatens them with life sentences, exploits their weaknesses. Vario's disappointed, but not surprised. What surprises him is that it's Henry, because Vario genuinely cared about Henry, saw him as more than just an earner, as family. And family doesn't betray family. Except Henry just did. Jimmy Burke's indictment comes next. Federal prosecutors can't charge him with Lufthansa directly. The statute of limitations has expired. Can't charge him with the murders because the evidence is too circumstantial. No bodies from many of the victims. No physical evidence linking Burke to the killings. Just Henry's testimony about conversations. So they charge Burke with the Boston College point-shaving scheme. It's not murder. It's not the big robbery that made him famous. But it's prosecutable. It's provable. And it carries serious time. Burke's in prison already when the indictment comes down. He's serving time for a parole violation unrelated to Lufthansa. So the new charges just extend his sentence. But what infuriates Burke isn't the additional time. It's the betrayal. Henry Hill was supposed to be solid. Supposed to be someone who understood the rules, who would do time before cooperating. Burke had ordered Henry killed before the arrest specifically because he feared this scenario. Now his fears are confirmed, and Burke's stuck in federal prison, unable to reach Henry, unable to send the message he sends to everyone who violates the code. But Burke can still send messages to Henry's family. Karen gets anonymous phone calls at their new location. Hang-ups, heavy breathing, sometimes a voice that just says we know where you are. The calls are designed to terrorize, to remind the Hills that witness protection isn't absolute safety, that there are people looking for them, people who want revenge. Karen stops answering the phone, stops letting the kids answer. lives in constant fear that someone's going to show up at the door. The first trial begins in January 1981. United States versus Richard Kuhn and James Burke. The Boston College point-shaving case. Henry takes the stand, and the courtroom is packed. Media, prosecutors, defense attorneys, sketch artists. Everyone wants to see the mobster turned informant. The man who's breaking the code in open court. Henry's wearing a suit, clean-shaven, sober for the first time in years because the FBI won't let him use drugs while he's a government witness. He looks almost respectable. Nothing like the paranoid cocaine addict who got arrested 9 months earlier. The prosecutor walks Henry through his testimony methodically, establishing his background, his history with Burke and Vario, his involvement in organized crime, then getting to the specifics of the point-shaving scheme, how it was conceived, who participated, how the betting worked, how much money was involved. Henry's testimony is detailed and damning. He provides dates and locations and conversations. He identifies Burke as the financier, explains how players were recruited and paid. The defense attorneys attack viciously during cross-examination. They paint Henry as a drug addict whose memory is unreliable, a career criminal who'll say anything to avoid prison, a man with every incentive to lie. They point out that Henry's getting a deal from the government, reduced sentence on his drug charges, money from witness protection, safety for his family. What's to stop him from fabricating testimony to keep those benefits? But Henry holds up under cross-examination. He's been prepped by prosecutors for weeks, knows every weakness in his testimony, knows how to respond to attacks on his credibility. And most importantly, his testimony is corroborated by other evidence. Rick Kuhn's testimony. Banking records showing unusual transactions. Betting records from bookmakers. The physical evidence supports what Henry's saying. He's not making this up. This happened exactly as he's described. The jury deliberates for 2 days. Returns guilty verdicts for both Kuhn and Burke. Kuhn gets 10 years in federal prison. His basketball career is over before it really started. His reputation destroyed. Burke gets 12 years on top of the time he's already serving. He'll be an old man before he's released, if he's ever released, because there are more indictments coming, more trials, more opportunities for prosecutors to stack sentences. Henry testifies again in March 1981, this time against Paul Vario. The extortion trial is more complex than the basketball case. It involves years of criminal activity, dozens of victims, financial records, and witness testimony. Henry's on the stand for 3 days, walking the jury through how Vario's operation worked, how loans got made and collected, how violence was used as enforcement, how legitimate businesses got infiltrated and corrupted. Vario's in the courtroom during Henry's testimony, makes eye contact several times. The look isn't anger. It's sadness, disappointment, like watching a son betray everything he was taught. Henry finds it difficult to meet Vario's eyes. This is the man who protected him when he was 12 years old, who gave him opportunities, who treated him like family. And Henry's repaying that loyalty by sending him to prison. The guilt is overwhelming, but so is the alternative. Henry reminds himself that Vario would have had him killed. That loyalty only flows one direction in organized crime. That he's saving his own life and his family's lives by testifying. The jury convicts Vario on multiple counts. He's sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. A 70-year-old man going away for a decade. He'll die in prison. Heart disease. Respiratory failure. November 1988. 8 years after Henry's testimony put him there. Vario never speaks to Henry again. Never sends a message. Just disappears into the federal system and dies knowing that the person he trusted most betrayed him. Other trials follow throughout 1981 and 82. Associates, lower-level guys, people Henry worked with for years. Each trial requires his testimony. Each testimony sends someone to prison. The prosecutors are systematically dismantling Vario's crew, using Henry's information to build cases against dozens of defendants. It's the most comprehensive, organized crime prosecution in New York history, and it's all made possible by one cooperating witness. Henry's cooperation extends beyond Vario's crew. He provides information about other Lucchese family operations, about interactions with other families. Gambino, Colombo, Genovese. He's been around organized crime his entire adult life. He knows how it all connects. Who does business with whom? How territories are divided. How disputes get resolved. The FBI uses this information to build additional cases, to pursue investigations they didn't even know were possible. The testimony takes a psychological toll. Henry's identity for 25 years was built on being a wise guy, being connected, being someone who mattered in that world. Now he's the opposite. He's an informant, a rat, the lowest form of life in the criminal hierarchy. He can't go back to his old life. Can't even visit New York without risking assassination. His entire social structure has collapsed. Everyone he knew wants him dead. Everyone he trusted now sees him as a traitor. The Witness Protection Program tries to help him adjust, provides counseling, job training, assistance building a new life. But the program's designed for people who want to change, who want to become civilians. Henry doesn't want that. He doesn't know how to be that. His entire adult life has been criminal. The skills he has don't translate to legitimate employment. He can hijack a truck. He can collect a gambling debt. He can orchestrate complex criminal operations. Those aren't skills you put on a resume. Karen struggles even more. She's lost her entire support system. Her mother, her siblings, her friends, everyone who helped her navigate marriage and motherhood. She's in a strange city with a new identity, married to a man she barely recognizes. Henry's sober now, but he's also depressed, angry, resentful of the situation he's in. They fight constantly. About money, about the kids, about whether cooperating was worth it. Karen wonders if they should have taken their chances. If prison would have been better than this exile. The children are traumatized. Gina and Greg have been ripped from their schools. Their friends, their grandparents. They can't tell anyone who they really are. Can't explain why they moved suddenly. Can't maintain any connections to their previous lives. Greg in particular struggles with his father's choices. He's old enough to understand what Henry did, that his father's an informant, that they're in hiding because Henry testified against mobsters. The resentment builds. Father and son barely speak. The family gets relocated 3 times in 2 years. First to Nebraska, Omaha, Middle America. Henry hates it immediately. The weather, the pace, the people who have no idea what real life is like. He feels like an alien. Karen tries to make it work. Enrolls the kids in school, finds a house, attempts to build something resembling normalcy. But Henry sabotages it. He's drinking again. Not cocaine, but alcohol. Heavy drinking that leads to arguments and police visits and problems that attract exactly the kind of attention witness protection participants are supposed to avoid. The U.S. Marshals move them to Kentucky next. Independence. Another small city. Another attempt at starting over. Same results. Henry can't adjust, can't hold a job, can't stay sober, can't stop being who he fundamentally is. He gets arrested for drunk driving, gets arrested for public intoxication. Each arrest creates paperwork, creates exposure, creates risk that someone will make the connection between his new identity and his real identity. The marshals are losing patience. Witness protection isn't designed to be permanent babysitting for people who won't follow rules. It's designed to protect cooperating witnesses who genuinely want to disappear. Henry wants protection, but he doesn't want to change. Wants safety, but won't modify behavior that attracts danger. The marshals warn him repeatedly. Get sober. Stay out of trouble. Stop drawing attention. Henry agrees every time, then violates those agreements immediately. Washington State is the third location. Redmond, outside Seattle. The marshals hope that putting Henry on the opposite coast will somehow make the transition easier. It doesn't. Same pattern. Drinking. Fighting with Karen. Problems at work. The only difference is geography. Henry Hill can't escape himself no matter how many times they relocate him. The trials continue even as Henry's personal life disintegrates. He flies back to New York regularly to testify. Each trip requires security. Marshals escorting him from the airport to the courthouse. Armed protection in case Burke's people try something. The paranoia is exhausting. Constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering if every stranger is a potential assassin. living in a state of permanent fear that the next moment could be his last. But the testimony works. Conviction after conviction. Dozens of mobsters sent to prison on Henry's information. The Lucchese family's operations in Brooklyn and Queens are devastated. It takes them years to rebuild, to replace the leadership that Henry helped destroy. From the FBI's perspective, Henry Hill is the most successful cooperating witness in organized crime history. From Henry's perspective, he's a man who destroyed his own life to save it, and he's not sure the trade was worth it. By 1984, most of the trials are complete. The big cases have been prosecuted. Burke's in prison. Vario's in prison. Dozens of associates are serving time. The FBI doesn't need Henry's testimony as urgently anymore, which means his value to witness protection is diminishing. He's still protected, still receiving his stipend, but the intense security is relaxed. The frequent check-ins become less frequent. The marshals have other witnesses to manage, other cases to work. Henry's essentially on his own, living under a false identity in Washington state with a wife who resents him and children who barely speak to him. No friends, no family, no connection to the world that defined him for 40 years. Just exile, permanent exile in exchange for survival. He should be grateful. He's alive when 19 other people connected to Lufthansa are dead. But gratitude doesn't come easily when you've lost everything that mattered. Karen files for divorce in 1987. The final dissolution of their marriage won't happen for years, but the separation is immediate and irreversible. 22 years of marriage ending in a witness protection safe house in Washington. Henry doesn't fight it, can't fight it. He knows he destroyed their life, knows his choices created this situation. She takes the kids and moves, stays in the program, but establishes distance. Greg eventually writes a book about growing up as Henry Hill's son, about the trauma of witness protection, about watching his father testify against everyone he knew. It's not a flattering portrait. 1987 is also the year Henry gets kicked out of witness protection, officially expelled from the program for repeatedly violating protocol. The drinking, the drug use that resumed, the arrests, the failure to maintain his cover identity. The marshals determine he's more liability than asset. They give him a final stipend, wish him luck, tell him his new identity documents are his to keep, but the government's no longer responsible for his safety. He's on his own. Henry Hill, the man who testified against the mob and helped dismantle one of New York's most powerful crews, is now living without protection in a country where $1 million contract remains on his life. Free but forever looking over his shoulder. Alive but not really living. A ghost haunting the margins of a world that wants him dead. Chapter 13. Witness Protection Chaos. 1987. Henry Hill is 44 years old and completely unmoored. Kicked out of witness protection after 7 years of violating every rule the program established. The U.S. Marshals have had enough. Too many arrests. Too many drunk and disorderly incidents. Too many times Henry's blown his cover by telling people in bars who he really is. The alcohol loosens his tongue, and he can't resist. Can't resist telling stories about the mob, about Lufthansa, about testifying. Can't resist being Henry Hill, even when being Henry Hill could get him killed. The expulsion is both liberation and terror. Liberation because he's no longer under the marshal's supervision. No more check-ins. No more restrictions. No more pretending to be someone he's not. But terror because the mob still wants him dead. Jimmy Burke's still alive. Still in prison, but still connected. Still capable of ordering hits from behind bars. The contract on Henry's life hasn't expired. $1 million to whoever finds him and kills him. That bounty doesn't disappear just because witness protection ended. Henry's living in the Seattle area when the expulsion becomes official. He's got his false identity documents. Social security number, driver's license, birth certificate, all the paperwork that says he's someone other than Henry Hill. But those documents only work if he uses them consistently, if he stays disciplined. And discipline has never been Henry's strength, especially not when he's drinking, which is every day now. Karen's gone, living somewhere else in the program with the kids. The divorce isn't finalized, but the marriage is effectively over. 22 years reduced to paperwork and lawyers and bitter resentment. She blames him for everything: the arrests, the cooperation, the exile, the destruction of their family. And she's not wrong. Henry made every choice that led them here. She just had to live with the consequences. The kids are teenagers now. Gina's 19. Greg's 18. Old enough to make their own decisions about their father. Old enough to understand what he did and what it cost them. Greg's particularly angry. He's written extensively about his childhood, about the trauma of witness protection, about constantly moving, about never being able to tell friends who he really was, about watching his father testify and knowing that testimony made them targets. The relationship between father and son is fractured beyond repair. Henry tries to work legitimate jobs: restaurant management, sales, construction, anything that pays and doesn't require too much scrutiny of his background. But he's terrible at all of it. Can't show up on time. Can't follow instructions from supervisors. Can't suppress his instinct to work angles and find shortcuts. He spent his entire adult life in organized crime. The straight world makes no sense to him. The pay is terrible. The work is boring. The respect is non-existent. He's just another middle-aged guy with a questionable resume trying to make rent. The drinking gets worse. Henry's consuming a bottle of whiskey daily, sometimes more. It's self-medication for depression and anxiety, and the crushing realization that his life is essentially over. He's alive, but he's not living. He's existing in a gray zone between the world he destroyed and a civilian life he's incapable of building. The alcohol makes it tolerable, makes the loneliness less acute, makes the fear of assassination feel distant. He gets arrested again in 1988. Burglary. He broke into a pharmacy looking for pills, painkillers, sedatives, anything to supplement the alcohol. It's pathetic. Henry Hill, who once pulled off the largest cash robbery in American history, is breaking into a small-town pharmacy like a desperate junkie. The police find him inside at 3 in the morning. Arrest him. Charge him with felony burglary. His lawyer negotiates a plea deal. Probation. Mandatory counseling. Another mark on a record that's already destroyed. The counseling doesn't help. Henry sits in group therapy sessions with other addicts and listens to their stories about trauma and addiction and recovery. He can't relate. Their problems seem trivial compared to what he's experienced. They're dealing with childhood abuse or divorce or job loss. Henry's dealing with having destroyed the only world he ever belonged to and living in permanent exile with a price on his head. The therapist tries to help, encourages Henry to process his choices, to find meaning in civilian life, to build new relationships and new purposes. It's well-intentioned, but useless. Because Henry doesn't want to change. He wants his old life back, wants to be connected again, wants the respect and the money and the sense of belonging that came with being a wise guy. That life is gone, destroyed by his own testimony. But he can't let it go, can't accept that he's just a regular person now. So he clings to the past, tells stories in bars about his mob days, shows people old photos when he's drunk enough, lives in memories because the present is unbearable. Money becomes a constant problem. The government stipend from witness protection is gone. Henry's making minimum wage when he can hold a job. The legitimate economy doesn't reward hijacking skills or loan collection experience. He's broke most of the time, borrowing money from acquaintances, falling behind on rent, getting evicted, moving to cheaper and cheaper apartments. The downward spiral is obvious to everyone except Henry. In 1989, Karen files for divorce officially. The paperwork gets served while Henry's working at a restaurant in Redmond. He signs without reading, doesn't fight for custody or assets because there's nothing to fight for. No assets, no money. The kids don't want to see him anyway. The divorce is the legal acknowledgement of what's been true for years. The family is destroyed. The marriage is over. Henry's alone. He spirals further after the divorce. More drinking. More drugs when he can get them. Cocaine again. His drug of choice. The substance that makes him feel like the old Henry. Confident. Capable. Powerful. Of course, it's an illusion. He's not powerful. He's a washed-up informant, living under an alias in the Pacific Northwest working dead-end jobs. and getting high alone in studio apartments. But the cocaine lets him pretend otherwise. The arrests continue. 1989. Drone driving. His second DUI in 2 years. The judge threatens jail time, but settles for more probation and more counseling. Henry agrees to everything. Shows up for the required meetings. Says what the counselors want to hear. Then goes straight back to drinking the moment he's unsupervised. The pattern is predictable and destructive and seemingly unstoppable. Throughout all of this, Henry's paranoid about mob retaliation. Every stranger could be a hitman. Every car following him could be surveillance. Every knock on the door could be Burke's people finally tracking him down. He sleeps with a gun under his pillow. Checks windows constantly. Varies his routes and routines. The fear never goes away. It's a constant background noise that alcohol and drugs temporarily quiet but never eliminate. The reality is that by the late 80s, the mob has mostly moved on. Burke's still in prison. Vario's dead. Most of the guys who knew Henry personally are either dead or incarcerated. The new generation of Lucchese associates has other concerns. The contract probably still exists on paper, but nobody's actively hunting Henry. He's not worth the resources it would take to find him. Not worth the FBI attention that killing a cooperating witness would bring. He's more valuable forgotten than dead. But Henry doesn't know this. Can't know this. So he lives in constant fear. And that fear becomes its own kind of prison. Worse than federal custody, because there's no release date. No defined sentence. Just indefinite terror that any moment could be his last. It's psychologically devastating. The paranoia feeds the substance abuse, which feeds the paranoia. A vicious cycle that destroys whatever's left of his mental health. In 1990, everything changes. A journalist named Nicholas Pileggi publishes a book. Wise Guy. It's Henry's story. The full account of his life in the mob and his cooperation with the FBI. Pileggi spent years interviewing Henry, recording his stories, fact-checking against court records and FBI documents. The book is Henry's attempt to explain himself, to justify his choices, to claim some kind of narrative control over his own life. Wise Guy becomes a bestseller immediately. Critics praise its inside look at organized crime, the authentic details that only a true insider could provide. Readers devour the story of a mobster who broke the code and survived. It's compelling and brutal and honest about the violence and betrayal that defined Henry's world. Simon & Schuster pays Henry nearly $100,000 for the rights to his story. It's the most money he's had at one time since his Lufthansa cut. Then Martin Scorsese reads Wise Guy. One of cinema's greatest directors sees the potential for a film. He contacts Pileggi. They collaborate on a screenplay. The project moves forward quickly. Robert De Niro signs on a play Jimmy Burke. Joe Pesci will play Tommy DeSimone. Ray Liotta gets cast as Henry Hill. Warner Brothers finances the production. And suddenly Henry Hill's life is being transformed into a major motion picture. Goodfellas begins filming in 1989. Henry's involved peripherally. He meets Ray Liotta once or twice. Gives input on certain details. Teaches Robert De Niro how to hold a cigarette like Jimmy Burke. How to pistol whip someone. Small details that add authenticity. But mostly Henry's kept at arm's length. The filmmakers want his story, but not his presence. He's a consultant. A resource. Not a creative partner. The film premieres in September 1990. Henry attends a New York screening. His first time back in the city since entering witness protection a decade earlier. It's surreal. Terrifying. He's surrounded by security, but still expects Burke's people to recognize him, to make a move. But nothing happens. He watches his life played out on screen. Watches Ray Liotta portray him as charming and dangerous and ultimately cowardly. Watches the Lufthansa Heist and the murders and the final betrayal that saved his life and destroyed everything else. The reviews are extraordinary. Critics call Goodfellas one of the greatest films ever made. Scorsese's masterpiece. A brutal and honest portrayal of mob life. The film gets 6 Academy Award nominations. Wins 1 for Joe Pesci's performance as Tommy. It's a cultural phenomenon. Everyone's talking about it, quoting it, analyzing it. And Henry Hill is suddenly famous. Not infamous. Famous. His story is mainstream entertainment. The attention is both validating and dangerous. Validating because finally people understand his life, understand the impossible choices he faced, understand that cooperation wasn't cowardice, but survival. But dangerous because the publicity reminds everyone he's alive, reminds the mob that Henry Hill exists, reminds them that he testified and walked away. The film makes him a celebrity, but it also makes him a target again. Henry does interviews, television appearances. He's on talk shows discussing the film and his life. He's careful not to reveal his current location, careful not to provide details that could help people find him. But the exposure itself is risky. The mob watches television. They see Henry on Letterman and Oprah. They know he's out there somewhere, living freely while their people are in prison or dead because of his testimony. The money from the book and film should set Henry up, should provide financial security for the first time since witness protection ended. But Henry goes through it fast. Gambling, drinking, bad investments, lending money to people who never repay him. Within 2 years, most of the $100,000 is gone. He's back to struggling financially, back to working low-wage jobs, back to barely surviving. But something's different now. Henry's got a story that people want to hear, a perspective that's valuable. He starts getting paid for appearances, for interviews, for consulting on other mob-related projects. It's not steady income, not reliable, but it's something. It's a way to monetize his past without returning to crime. A way to be Henry Hill publicly without being Henry Hill the fugitive. Karen's still in witness protection somewhere. The kids are adults now, making their own lives. Gina's working. Greg's writing about their experiences. They've built lives separate from their father, lives that don't include him. Henry's relationship with his children is effectively non-existent. Occasional phone calls, brief conversations that feel obligatory rather than meaningful. The damage is permanent. In 1991, Henry meets a woman named Kelly Allor. She knows who he is, knows his history. They get married quickly. It's Henry's second marriage since Karen. Another attempt to build something normal, to have a relationship that isn't defined by mob life or witness protection. But Kelly's marrying Henry Hill, the character from Goodfellas, the charming gangster from a movie, not the alcoholic ex-informant who's broke and traumatized and incapable of emotional intimacy. The marriage lasts 6 years before falling apart. Same patterns. Henry's drinking, his inability to hold jobs, his obsession with his past. Kelly realizes she's not living with a person. She's living with a ghost. A man who died when he entered witness protection and never figured out how to be reborn as someone else. They divorce in 1996. Henry's alone again. By the mid-90s, Henry's been out of witness protection for nearly a decade. He survived without government protection. Survived despite the contract on his life. Survived because he's careful and lucky, and because the mob's moved on to other concerns. But survival isn't living. Henry exists in a strange limbo. Too famous to disappear completely. Too notorious to build a normal life. Forever defined by choices he made in 1980 when the FBI arrested him and forced him to choose between prison and cooperation. He chose cooperation, chose life, chose to betray everyone he knew to save himself and his family. And 20 years later, he's still paying the price for that choice, still living with the consequences, still wondering if it was worth it, if survival without belonging is really survival at all. Chapter 14. Goodfellas and Celebrity. 1990. The year Goodfellas releases in theaters changes everything for Henry Hill. Not his circumstances, not his fundamental situation, but his public identity. For 10 years, he's been a ghost, a man with a false name living in exile, known only to law enforcement and the people who want him dead. The film transforms him into something else entirely. A character, a cultural icon, the protagonist of one of cinema's greatest achievements. And Henry doesn't know how to process this transformation. The film is everywhere. Movie theaters across America. Television commercials advertising the release. Magazine covers analyzing Scorsese's masterpiece. Entertainment shows interviewing the cast. And at the center of all this attention is Henry's life. His crimes. His betrayal. His survival. Millions of people are watching a dramatized version of events that destroyed him. And they're entertained. They're fascinated. They're quoting dialogue based on conversations Henry actually had with people who actually died. Ray Liotta's performance captures something essential about Henry. The charm, the ambition, the moral flexibility that allowed him to participate in terrible things without seeing himself as a terrible person. Liotta makes Henry sympathetic, makes audiences understand his choices, even when those choices involve hijacking and extortion, an accessory to murder. It's a generous portrayal, more generous than Henry deserves, but it's also accurate in ways that disturb him when he watches. Robert De Niro's Jimmy Burke is terrifying, cold, calculating. The scene where Burke decides to kill everyone connected to Lufthansa is played with such chilling pragmatism that audiences understand the logic even while being horrified by it. De Niro spent time with Henry learning Burke's mannerisms, how he held cigarettes, how he moved, how he communicated threats without explicit words. The performance is so accurate that watching it makes Henry feel like Burke's in the room, like the man who tried to have him killed is somehow present through De Niro's embodiment. Joe Pesci's Tommy DeSimone is pure violence. Unpredictable, explosive. The famous funny how scene where Tommy turns a joke into a threat is based on a real incident Henry witnessed. Pesci captures Tommy's volatility perfectly. The way he could go from laughing to killing in seconds. The way everyone around him walked on eggshells because nobody knew what would set him off. Watching Pesci play Tommy brings back memories Henry's been trying to suppress for a decade. Tommy's been dead since 1980, killed by the Gambinos. But on screen, he's alive again. Threatening, dangerous, real. The film's success is unprecedented. Box office receipts climb into the hundreds of millions. Critics declare it a masterpiece. The American Film Institute eventually ranks it among the greatest films ever made. It becomes part of the cultural lexicon. People quote it constantly. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. Funny how. Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut. Lines from Henry's actual life become memes before memes exist. And Henry Hill becomes famous. Not infamous. Famous. People recognize him on the street. Want autographs. Want to hear stories. Want to know what it was really like. The attention is intoxicating for someone who's spent a decade in exile. For 10 years, Henry's been nobody. Just another anonymous face in witness protection. Now he's somebody again. Not a wise guy. Not connected. But recognized. Valued for his story and his survival. He starts doing interviews. Lots of interviews. Local news. National programs. Howard Stern has him on the radio show multiple times. Stern loves the mob stories. Loves Henry's candid discussion of crimes and violence. Loves that Henry doesn't apologize or moralize. Just tells stories like he's discussing construction work instead of felonies. The appearances are popular. Listeners call in with questions. Henry answers honestly. Describes hijackings. Describes how loan sharking worked. Describes the Lufthansa heist in detail that the film simplified. In 2004, Charlie Rose interviews Henry for 60 minutes. It's a major profile. Serious journalism examining Henry's life and choices 24 years after he became an informant. Rose asks difficult questions. How many people died because of your testimony? Do you feel remorse? Do you regret cooperating? Henry's answers are complicated. He expresses some regret about specific people. About Paul Vario, who he genuinely cared about. But he doesn't apologize for surviving. Doesn't second-guess the fundamental choice to cooperate rather than die. The interview shows a man who's aged considerably. Henry's 61. Gray. Heavier. The years of substance abuse visible in his face. But his mind is sharp. His memory for detail is extraordinary. He recalls conversations from 30 years prior with perfect clarity. Describes crimes with the precision of someone reliving them rather than remembering. The interview is compelling television. Millions watch, and Henry's fee for participating helps pay bills for another few months. In 2006, Entertainment Weekly arranges a photo shoot. Henry Hill and Ray Liotta together. The real gangster and the actor who portrayed him. The photos are striking. Liotta looks polished, professional. Henry looks rough, worn down by decades of hard living. They stand side by side, and the contrast is jarring. Liotta played Henry in his prime, young and ambitious and successful. The real Henry standing next to him is a cautionary tale about what happens when that life catches up with you. Ray Liotta urges Henry to get help during the shoot. Henry's drinking visibly during the session, slurring words, unsteady. Liotta sees a man destroying himself and suggests rehabilitation. 2 days later, Henry checks into an alcohol treatment facility, his third or fourth attempt at sobriety. The pattern is familiar. Detox, counseling, promises to change, release, immediate relapse. The addiction is too powerful, too deeply connected to trauma he's never properly processed. The treatment doesn't last. Henry's out within weeks. Back to drinking, back to struggling. The fame from Goodfellas provides temporary income, but no stability, no foundation for building a sustainable life. He's living off his past, monetizing stories about crimes committed decades ago. It's not a career. It's not a future. It's just survival with better publicity. Henry publishes a cookbook in 2002. The Wise Guy Cookbook. Recipes from his childhood and his time in the mob. His mother's Italian dishes. Meals he ate in prison where connected guys got real food smuggled in. Sunday gravy. Veal cutlets. The kind of food that defined mob culture. The book is successful. People buy it for the stories as much as the recipes. Each dish includes anecdotes about mob life, about who he ate with and where and under what circumstances. It's another way to monetize his past. He writes another book in 2003 with Byron Schreckengost, A Goodfellas Guide to New York, a tour of mob locations across the city, where hijackings happened, where bodies got dumped, where famous mobsters lived and operated. It's morbid tourism, but people are fascinated. They want to walk the same streets Henry walked, want to see the locations from Goodfellas, want to connect the fiction to the reality. The book sells modestly, enough to keep Henry afloat for a while longer. In 2004, he publishes Gangsters and Goodfellas with Gus Russo. More stories, more details about mob life and witness protection and the aftermath of cooperation. Henry's building a cottage industry around his own history. Each book, each interview, each appearance is another transaction. Trading stories for money, trading the past for present survival. It's exhausting, repetitive, but it's all he has. Henry opens a restaurant in 2007. Wise Guys in West Haven, Connecticut. It's supposed to be a legitimate business, a place where he can use his cooking skills and mob notoriety to attract customers. People eat there because Henry Hill owns it, because they might see him, might hear stories, might feel connected to the world Goodfellas portrayed. But Henry's not a businessman. He's a criminal who's trying to go straight without knowing how. The restaurant struggles from day one. A month after opening, there's a fire. The official report says electrical malfunction, but Henry suspects arson. Maybe mob-connected guys sending a message. Maybe competitors who resent the attention his restaurant attracts. Maybe just bad luck in a life defined by bad luck. Whatever the cause, the fire destroys the restaurant. Henry doesn't have insurance adequate to rebuild. Wise Guys closes permanently. Another failure. Another attempt at legitimate life that crashes and burns. Literally. The public appearances continue throughout the 2000s. Henry's a fixture at mob conventions, true crime events where people pay to hear former criminals discuss their exploits. He shares panels with other cooperating witnesses, with former law enforcement, with crime journalists. He tells the same stories he's been telling for 20 years. Lufthansa, the murders, the decision to cooperate. Audiences never tire of hearing them. Henry never tires of telling them. It's the only context where he's valued, where people treat him with something resembling respect. But the appearances also expose him. Every time Henry does a public event, he's visible. Every interview, every photograph, every television appearance reminds the mob that he's alive and accessible. The contract on his life theoretically still exists. Most of the people who placed it are dead or incarcerated. But mob memory is long. Grudges get passed down. Some young guy trying to make his bones could decide that killing Henry Hill would earn respect. prove loyalty, create a reputation. Henry's aware of this risk, lives with it constantly. But he needs the money, needs the attention, needs to feel relevant. So he does the appearances despite the danger, despite knowing that every public moment is a potential target opportunity. The fear is constant, but so is the need. The need to be Henry Hill rather than whatever false identity the witness protection program created. The need to be recognized and remembered and valued for who he actually is. His relationship with his children remains fractured. Gina and Greg have built adult lives separate from their father. Greg publishes a memoir eventually, On the Run, a Mafia childhood, written with his sister Gina. The book describes their experience in witness protection, the trauma of constant relocation, the fear, the isolation, the anger at their father for creating this situation. It's not a forgiving portrait. Henry reads it and feels the full weight of what his choices cost his family. The book describes specific incidents. Times Henry got drunk and blew their cover. Times they had to move suddenly because he'd been reckless. Times Karen had to protect the children from their father's behavior. It's painful reading, not because it's untrue, but because it's completely accurate. Henry destroyed his family, not just through his crimes, not just through his cooperation, but through his inability to be the person witness protection required, through his addiction and selfishness and fundamental inability to prioritize anyone's needs above his own. He tries to apologize, reaches out to his children, wants to explain, wants to justify, wants to be understood, but understanding doesn't equal forgiveness. Gina and Greg understand why Henry cooperated, understand he was saving his life, but understanding doesn't repair the damage, doesn't restore lost years, doesn't create a relationship where none exists. The conversations are brief, obligatory, empty of real connection. Karen's remarried by this point, living under her witness protection identity with a new husband, someone stable, someone without mob connections or drug problems or federal indictments. She's built a life that doesn't include Henry, doesn't reference their marriage, except as something that happened to someone else a long time ago. The divorce was finalized years ago. The emotional divorce happened long before that. In 2008, Henry's interviewed for a BBC documentary. The reporter asks about his victims, the people hurt by his crimes, the families of the 19 people murdered after Lufthansa. Henry's response is defensive. I don't give a heck what those people think. I'm doing the right thing now. It's a telling moment. Henry's not interested in accountability, not interested in examining the human cost of his lifestyle. He's focused on survival, on justification, on maintaining the narrative that cooperation was heroic rather than necessary. The same year, he appears in the Irish mob documentary series. Episode 3 focuses on Henry's relationship with Jimmy Burke, on their crimes together, on the betrayal that sent Burke to prison. Henry's comfortable discussing this. He's told these stories so many times they're rehearsed, polished. He knows what details audiences want, knows how to make himself seem sympathetic while describing terrible things. It's performance, entertainment, the commodification of trauma and crime. In 2010, Henry hosts a private screening of Goodfellas at the Museum of the American Gangster. It's the film's 20th anniversary, 2 decades since the movie that made his life famous released in theaters. He introduces the film, talks about what it was like seeing his life on screen, answers questions afterward. The audience loves it. They're meeting the real Henry Hill, the man who survived, the man who broke omerta and lived to tell about it. But what they're really meeting is a performance, a version of Henry Hill that's been refined through hundreds of interviews and appearances. The real Henry Hill is damaged, traumatized, addicted, lonely, living in cheap apartments and struggling to pay bills, drinking himself to death slowly. The public Henry Hill is charming, full of stories, a survivor with perspective. The gap between these versions is enormous. By 2011, Henry's 68 years old. His health is failing. Decades of smoking, decades of drug and alcohol abuse, decades of stress and fear. His heart is damaged. His liver is damaged. His body is breaking down. He's on medication for multiple conditions: blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease. The doctors tell him to stop drinking, stop smoking, take care of himself. He ignores them, because taking care of himself requires believing he has a future worth preserving. And Henry stopped believing that years ago. He appears on AMC's Mob Week in 2011, discussing The Godfather and Goodfellas and other mob films with former mobsters and experts. It's surreal. Henry Hill analyzing fictional portrayals of the life he actually lived, discussing which parts are accurate and which parts are Hollywood invention. He knows the difference intimately, lives with a difference every day. The movies make mob life look glamorous, exciting, full of camaraderie and respect. The reality is paranoia and violence and betrayal. The reality is being 68 years old and alone and broke. The reality is surviving without living. But Henry doesn't say any of this during Mob Week. He stays on script, tells entertaining stories, plays the role audiences expect. The charming gangster, the survivor, the man who beat the system, because that's the only version of himself that has value anymore. The only version people want to hear from. The truth is too dark, too depressing, too honest about the cost of the life he chose and the survival he achieved. Chapter 15, The Final Act. 2011 fades into 2012 and Henry Hill is living in California, Topanga Canyon specifically, a neighborhood northwest of Los Angeles known for its bohemian character and winding mountain roads. It's about as far from Brooklyn as you can get geographically and culturally. Henry's with Lisa Caserta, his girlfriend of 6 years, the longest stable relationship he's had since Karen. Lisa knows everything about his past, knows who he is and what he did. She's chosen to be with him anyway, chosen to love a man who's fundamentally broken. The apartment is modest, nothing like the houses Henry lived in during his earning years. No Cadillac in the driveway, no expensive furniture, just a simple place with a view of the canyon and enough space for two people living on limited income. Henry's 68 years old. His earning days are over. He's living off Social Security and occasional fees from interviews and appearances. The money from Goodfellas is long gone, spent or gambled or simply mismanaged into nothing. His health is deteriorating visibly. The decades of abuse have caught up with his body in ways that can't be ignored anymore. His heart is the primary concern. Years of smoking, years of cocaine, years of stress and fear and anger. The cardiovascular system can only take so much before it starts failing. Henry's had multiple heart attacks already, small ones that sent him to the emergency room, warning signs that his body is shutting down. The doctors prescribe medication, nitroglycerin, blood thinners, beta blockers. Henry takes them inconsistently. Sometimes he forgets. Sometimes he just doesn't care. Lisa tries to manage his health, make sure he takes his pills, monitors his diet, limits his drinking. But Henry's stubborn. He's been making his own decisions since he was 12 years old. Doesn't take well to being managed, even when the management is for his benefit. They fight about it, about medication and doctor's appointments and lifestyle changes that Henry resists, because accepting them means accepting that he's dying. And Henry Hill has never been good at accepting reality. He's still doing interviews occasionally, still monetizing his story. In 2012, he collaborates with author Daniel Simone on a book about Lufthansa, The Lufthansa Heist. It's supposed to be the definitive account, the inside story with details Henry never shared publicly before. They work on it for 2 years. Henry providing information, Simone doing research and writing. The book won't be published until August 2015, 3 years after Henry's death. But in early 2012, he's still working on it, still believing he'll see it completed. The book is Henry's attempt to control the narrative one last time. Goodfellas told his story, but it was Scorsese's interpretation. Pileggi's book was closer to the truth, but still filtered through a journalist's perspective. This Lufthansa book is supposed to be Henry's version, his account of the planning and execution and aftermath, the murders, the paranoia, the decisions Burke made that led to 19 deaths. Henry wants history to understand that Lufthansa wasn't just a robbery. It was a catalyst for mass murder, and he wants credit for being the one who finally brought Burke and Vario to justice. But talking about Lufthansa exhausts him, physically and emotionally. Every interview requires him to relive those years. The fear, the violence, the friends who got killed. Tommy DeSimone especially. Tommy's murder still haunts Henry. They grew up together, committed crimes together. Tommy protected him countless times. And Henry's testimony helped create the circumstances that led to Tommy's execution. He tells himself that Tommy died for killing Billy Bats, that the Gambinos would have found out eventually, that Henry's cooperation didn't directly cause Tommy's death. But he knows the truth. Everything's connected. Every action has consequences. And Henry's testimony set off a chain reaction that destroyed dozens of lives. His relationship with his children remains distant. Gina and Greg are adults now with their own families. Their own lives built carefully away from their father's shadow. They talk occasionally. Brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays. Superficial conversations that avoid the past and don't plan for any future. Henry wants more. Wants closeness. Wants to be a grandfather to kids he's never met. But wanting doesn't create relationships. Can't repair the damage done during their childhoods when he was drunk and high and incapable of being the father they needed. Karen's somewhere in witness protection still. Henry doesn't know where. Doesn't have contact information. Their divorce finalized years ago, but the emotional separation happened long before that. She's living under a different name. Probably remarried. Definitely moved on. Henry occasionally wonders what she tells people about her past. If she admits she was married to a mobster. If she shares that part of her history, or keeps it buried like a secret too dangerous to reveal. He'll never know. That door closed permanently when he testified. Spring of 2012 arrives. Henry's birthday is June 11th. He'll turn 69. Lisa plans a small celebration. Nothing elaborate. Just dinner and cake. Maybe some friends. The kind of ordinary birthday that ordinary people have. Henry agrees to it even though birthdays feel meaningless at this point. He's not celebrating another year lived. He's acknowledging another year survived. There's a difference. But his health worsens before the birthday arrives. The heart problems intensify. Chest pain. Shortness of breath. Fatigue that makes simple activities exhausting. Lisa drives him to the hospital multiple times in May. Each visit results in the same advice. Rest. Take your medication. Reduce stress. Stop smoking. Stop drinking. Change your lifestyle, or your heart will give out completely. Henry nods. Agrees. Goes home and does exactly what he's been doing. Because changing at 68 feels impossible. The patterns are too ingrained. The addictions too powerful. The fundamental personality too fixed. Henry Hill is who he is. A former mobster. A cooperating witness. A man who destroyed his own life to save it and never figured out how to build something new from the wreckage. Asking him to change now is asking him to become someone else entirely. And there's no time left for that kind of transformation. June 11th, 2012. Henry's 69th birthday. He wakes up in the Topanga Canyon apartment. Lisa makes breakfast. They eat together. Henry's tired. More tired than usual. His chest hurts, but chest pain is normal now. Constant companion of a failing heart. He takes his medication. Takes more than he should because the pain is worse than usual. Lisa suggests calling a doctor. Henry refuses. Says he's fine. Says he just needs rest. Says he'll be better tomorrow. They watch television. Henry dozes on the couch. Lisa checks on him periodically. He seems okay. Just sleeping. Just resting. The way the doctors said he should. The day passes quietly. No celebration really. No friends visiting. Just two people in an apartment. One dying slowly. The other watching helplessly. Night comes. They go to bed. Henry's exhausted. Moves slowly. Lisa helps him. He jokes that he's getting old. That his body doesn't work like it used to. Makes light of symptoms that should terrify him. That would terrify anyone who understood how serious they were. But Henry spent his entire life avoiding fear by pretending it doesn't exist. He's not going to change that pattern on his 69th birthday. June 12th, the day after his birthday. Henry doesn't wake up normally. His breathing is wrong. Labored. Irregular. Lisa realizes something's seriously wrong. She calls 911. Paramedics arrive quickly. They work on Henry in the apartment, trying to stabilize him, trying to get his heart rhythm regular. They transport him to a Los Angeles hospital, rush him to emergency. Lisa follows in her car, terrified, knowing this is different, knowing this might be the end. The hospital staff works frantically. Henry's had another heart attack, a serious one. His heart is failing. They try medication, try procedures, but his cardiovascular system has been compromised for too long. The damage is too extensive. His body can't recover, can't bounce back one more time. After decades of abuse, after 69 years of living harder than most people could survive, Henry Hill's heart gives out. He dies in the hospital, June 12, 2012, one day after his 69th birthday. Lisa's with him. She tells CBS News later that he had been sick for a long time. His heart gave out. She adds that he went out pretty peacefully for a good fella. It's a fitting epitaph. Henry Hill, who lived violently and betrayed everyone he knew, dies peacefully in a hospital bed. Not murdered, not executed, not killed by the mob that wanted him dead for 32 years. He dies of natural causes. Heart disease. The mundane killer that claims millions. Not the dramatic death his life story seemed to promise. The news spreads quickly. Henry Hill is dead. The man who inspired Goodfellas. The mobster who became an informant. The wise guy who survived when 19 others didn't. Media outlets publish obituaries. Entertainment websites run tributes. The story of his death becomes news for a day or two, then fades. The world moves on. Because Henry Hill's story ended in 1980 when he cooperated. Everything after was just epilogue. 32 years of living in the aftermath of that choice. 32 years of trying to be someone without being anyone. Ray Liotta releases a statement. Although I played Henry Hill in the movie Goodfellas, I only met him a few short times, so I can't say I knew him, but I did know he lived a complicated life. My heart goes out to his family, and may he finally rest in peace. It's respectful and distant, acknowledging Henry's complexity without claiming intimacy. Liotta played Henry, embodied him, made him famous, but he didn't know him. Nobody really knew Henry, not even Henry himself. The funeral is small, private. No mob guys, obviously. They're dead or in prison or want nothing to do with Henry's memory. No former associates, no one from his old life. Just Lisa. A few friends, people who knew him in his final years when he was just an old man with stories instead of a criminal with connections. They bury him in California, far from Brooklyn, far from the cab stand where it all started, far from Roberts Lounge and Kennedy Airport, and all the locations that defined his life. His children don't attend. The relationship was too damaged, too complicated. Their father died years before his body did, died when he testified, when he entered witness protection, when he destroyed the family trying to save it. They mourn the father they wish they'd had, not the one who actually existed. There's a difference. Always has been. The Lufthansa money was never recovered. $6.75 million. Gone. Spent or hidden or lost to history. The investigation technically remains open, but nobody's actively pursuing it. Burke died in prison in 1996. Lung cancer. Age 64. Vario died in 1988. Both men went to their graves without revealing what happened to the money. Henry didn't know either. Burke never told him, never trusted him with that information. Smart decision in retrospect. Only one person was ever convicted for the Lufthansa Heist. Louis Werner, the cargo supervisor who provided the inside information. He served 5 years. Got released. Died in obscurity. Everyone else involved either got killed in the aftermath or, like Henry, cooperated with authorities. The greatest cash robbery in American history remains technically unsolved. A perfect crime rendered imperfect only by the murders that followed. Henry Hill's legacy is complicated. He helped dismantle organized crime operations that terrorized New York for decades. His testimony led to 50 convictions, cleaned up unions, freed businesses from mob control. From law enforcement's perspective, he was invaluable, a cooperating witness who delivered results. But from the perspective of the families whose loved ones were murdered after Lufthansa, Henry's a villain. His involvement in that heist triggered Burke's killing spree. 19 people dead because of decisions Henry participated in. He didn't pull triggers, didn't order hits, but he was complicit, part of the machine that generated violence as casually as it generated income. From a mob's perspective, Henry's the ultimate traitor, a rat who violated the most sacred code, who sent friends to prison, who destroyed families and operations through testimony. The fact that he died of natural causes rather than assassination feels like cosmic injustice to people who believe snitches should die violently. And from his own family's perspective, Henry's the father who destroyed their lives, who forced them into witness protection, who made them give up everything, who was absent even when present. Greg's memoir makes this clear. The damage Henry inflicted extended far beyond his criminal associates. His children paid for his choices, lived in fear, lost their identities, grew up traumatized by a life they didn't choose. Henry himself probably saw his legacy differently, saw himself as a survivor, someone who navigated impossible circumstances and came out alive, someone who beat the odds when everyone expected him to die. He cooperated because the alternative was death, made the only rational choice available, and lived with the consequences for 32 years. But survival isn't redemption. Living isn't the same as living well. Henry Hill survived, but at tremendous cost. Lost his family, lost his identity, lost any sense of belonging. Spent 3 decades in exile from the only world he ever understood. Made money telling stories about the life he destroyed. Became famous for being infamous. Lived long enough to see his crimes transformed into entertainment. He died alone in a fundamental sense, surrounded by people, but disconnected from everyone who mattered. His wife gone, his children distant, his friends all dead or imprisoned or estranged. The life he chose led inevitably to isolation, to being the man everyone knew about, but nobody really knew. June 12, 2012. Henry Hill's heart stops beating in a Los Angeles hospital, and with it ends one of the most remarkable criminal stories in American history. A boy from Brownsville who wanted to be a gangster, who achieved that dream and lost everything because of it, who survived when he shouldn't have, who testified and lived to tell about it. The mobster who broke the code and lived, but lived without living, survived without redemption, made it to 69 years old by betraying everyone he knew, and died peacefully despite earning a violent death. That's the story of Henry Hill, the real good fella, the man who inspired the movie, the wise guy who became a witness. He wanted to be a gangster as far back as he could remember, and he succeeded, and it destroyed him, and he survived the destruction, and survived until survival was all that was left. This is where his story ends, not with a bullet, not with revenge, not with justice or redemption or meaning, just with a heart giving out after 69 years of being pushed beyond its limits, just with death in a hospital bed, just with the quiet end of a loud life. Henry Hill is dead. The legend lives on, and somewhere in Brooklyn, the Cabstand where it all started is still standing. Different ownership now, different purpose, but the building remains, a monument to ambition and betrayal. To the boy who stood at his window and watched gangsters across the street, who crossed that street at 12 years old and spent the next 57 years paying for that decision. The story's over. The legend remains, and the question hangs in the air unanswered. Was it worth it? Did Henry Hill make the right choice? Did he win or lose? Survive or merely delay the inevitable? He lived. That's undeniable. When 19 others died, Henry Hill lived. But the cost of that life was everything that made living worthwhile. Family, identity, belonging, purpose. He traded all of it for survival. And only Henry could say if the trade was fair. He's not saying anymore. His heart gave out. The story ends. The legend continues. And the Cabstand in Brownsville still stands, waiting for the next boy who looks out his window and dreams of being something more than what he is. Waiting for the next Henry Hill. There's always another one coming.